Thank you, and welcome to this, the September 27th meeting of the New York Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government. We welcome everyone, we welcome the public, and we will call this meeting to order, and I'm going to ask the Executive Director to declare that we have a quorum and to make any other statements that need to be made about the proceeding of this meeting.
Yes, thank you, Chair Davey. The meeting is being held pursuant to and in accordance with the provisions of the state's open meetings law. The meeting room we're using at the Commission's offices in Albany at 540 Broadway and the conference room at our Manhattan office at 25 Beaver Street are both open to the public during public session. Public session is also being live streamed. The link can be found on our website at www.ethics.ny.gov. In addition, one member of the Commission will be participating in today's meeting by video conferencing pursuant to Public Officers Law, Section 103-A, and the Commission's resolution and rules under that provision. And we do, in fact, have a quorum of commissioners present here in person at the Albany offices.
Great, thank you. We'll move to the approval of the minutes of the July 19th meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Commissioner Ayers, is there a second? Commissioner Edwards?
I have a couple of them.
Any revisions, corrections, additions, etc.? Vice Chair Austin.
Thank you. On page 4 of the minutes, it opens Executive Director Sanford. It should be Berland. I think the language on the bottom of page 5 where it says the Commission will ultimately be utilizing its entire budget going forward and is anticipating requesting, which will require, I think we should, which will require is grammatically incorrect, requesting a budgetary increase is the way it should read.
What page was that?
On
Page 5.
Bottom of page 5. Very last line before the brackets. And on page 7, the paragraph which begins Commissioner Cardozo, the third line at the very end, the who has should not be there. It should be which has, since the committee is not a who.
Any others?
I'm
Commissioner
sorry.
Wood? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think on page 12, the paragraph that starts Chair Davey, the 5th line down, I don't think the word scarily is the word intended on the
Could be.
shortly or scarcely. I'm not sure what the word should be, but scarily doesn't seem to be the right word. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Whittingham.
On page 3, where we have approval of the minutes, public session, we have May 23rd, 2023. Should be June 27th, 2023. Page 3. On page 3, at the bottom, I was not in the room. It said I voted in favor of the motion, but I was not in the room.
Okay. I think it picked up your abstention in the total number, but listed you as having voted for it because there are 4 abstentions.
Yeah, but I'm listed as in favor.
Sure, understood. Anything else? Anyone else? All right.
Move to adopt as amended.
Move it to the motion is to adopt as amended. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Ayes have it. The motions, the minutes are approved as amended. So we need to, Commissioner Ayers suggested in an email to us earlier this week that we consider making a change in the agenda under, I think it would be item 6. We would replace that with a discussion of the comprehensive review proposal that she provided for us in her email. Is there any objection to making that change in the agenda? So instead of looking at committee procedures for this meeting, we'll look at the comprehensive review of rules, regs, etc. Any objections there? All right, we'll proceed accordingly. All right, so starting with the operations report.
Thank you, Chair Davey. The operations reports for July and August respectively are under tabs B and C. As we have been doing, and this is true for each report since the beginning of the year, in addition to comparisons to staff activity in each category for the prior year to date and for the month in the corresponding period in 22 are included. And the first column is the column that will show the activity in the preceding months. Just generally, activity has continued to increase overall since the beginning of the year. The number of complaints and referrals we've received so far this year is nearly comparable to the corresponding period for the prior commission in 2022. In other areas, the figures reflect normal cyclical patterns as well as new patterns. For example, in lobbying, we're past the earliest phases of the current biennial period, which started in January and which will continue to the end of 2024. So the peak that occurred at the beginning of the year, which is also affected by the new lobbying training for lobbying clients under ECRA, also has affected activity on the lobbying side, particularly with respect to inquiries that we're receiving. In addition, the numbers are going down in terms of inquiries now that we've gotten past that initial introduction of the new lobbying ethics training. In ethics training, note we've added to the training table a new row to show, in addition to trainings conducted by our staff, ethics trainings that are conducted in the various agencies by their ethics officers and attorneys and others in those agencies. And you'll see for the numbers that it's quite impressive. Through the end of August, if you look under tab D on page 5, you'll see that we're now up to year to date, over 81,767 individuals reported as I'm sorry, under tab C. That's in addition to the 25,000 plus individuals who were trained in the prior year. After the new ethics training requirement incepted in July. So if you add the numbers together, you'll see that we're approaching a very, very robust figure as we move forward, which is very positive news.
Great.
And any questions about the operations report? I can respond.
Questions, comments, Commissioner Cardozo?
Appreciate what you just said, but I wonder if you could comment on the audit numbers on page 7 of Exhibit B, where it seems that there's been a decline in the number of random FDS reviews completed and an increase in the number of targeted FDS reviews. And I wonder if those 2 points are related.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, these things are a periodic thing. We have a target for the number of audits that are conducted. That's essentially prescribed by statute, and there are random selections. That's on the lobbying side, and those are drawn quarterly. And as the draws are completed, the numbers go down in terms of the numbers conducted. As they start and as they complete them, the numbers go up. But it's a periodic thing that you're going to see throughout the year. It's not a constant flow. of audits, of targeted reviews and random reviews that are conducted by the compliance audit and review team.
Anyone else?
I do have a question.
Sure, sure.
I just want a little bit more of an explanation about the investigations. So.
Could you just speak up a little,
Yeah, and
please?
tell us which page you're on.
On page 2, 1 of 7, exhibits. I see we received 115 tips and sent 7 letters, 15-day letters. I just wanted to get a better explanation of what these numbers mean.
I think we have Brian on remotely, Brian Weinberg, our Director of Investigations.
Can you repeat the question?
Please. What
I
was the
just
question?
wanted to get a better explanation of what these numbers mean.
For the
On page
investigation.
On page 1 of 7, Exhibit C, the number of tips versus the number of 15-day letters sent, and the number of matters. It just seems, it's not self-explanatory. So.
It's not
Did you hear the question?
So the 15-day letters are the investigations that have been have been opened, where the subject has then been made aware of the investigation. The tips that are coming in, those are the complaints that are coming in, and then the number of matters pending are those other matters that the investigation staff is doing preliminary investigations on.
Yeah, I understand what the headings are, thank you. But I'm trying to figure out, so there's 178 matters pending from previous years, is that it?
Correct.
Like 2015.
That includes all of the prior matters as well. So everything that was from Jacob and has been continuing, yes.
Okay, and all right.
And
Thank
then right.
Other questions, comments? Commissioner Whittingham?
Thank you. I see a bit decreased, and I don't know if there's a reason for it, our e-blast and publication in the lobbying section.
Where are
So,
you, please?
on page 3 of 7. So it's almost half as many, and I know that we have a lot more that we're trying to get out to notify the public. But we had 12 during the same time period last year, and this year we've got 7, or on the Jacob, and this year we have 7. So it's been pretty significant.
It depends on, so we normally we'll send out reminders for the filing deadlines and they go out. We will send out if there's any change that needs to be, alert filers need to know about, we'll send that out too. It really, it's one of those cyclical things that if it's not necessary to send something out, we won't. And, this was, we have, you're right, 7 out of 12, but it really just depends. I can't tell you which ones weren't sent out this year, but typically we'll send out reminders for the bi-monthly deadlines. We'll send out reminders for the CSA deadlines. If there's any change, we send out information. In fact, we sent out a lot of information at the end of 2022 on the new training requirements, so that could account for part of it. And then we now send out other information for the training, which kicked in January of 2023, but we did send out information about that in, I think it was November or December of 2022, which was a little unusual because that was a new requirement. Adding clients to the ethics training was new. So that could account for part of it, but it's really just a cyclical type of thing.
I was just wondering, since we had a lot more new stuff and more to report, and then it seems like we're sending out less than we did before the actual changes.
Let me add that in addition to the e-blasts and the notifications that are coming out directly from the lobbying group, in addition, our communications division is now extremely active, among other things, on social media. and more effectively using, I think, the website to push out information. So in conjunction with various lobbying filing periods, and generally, we have a constant flow through social media outlets and through notifications to the press, the media in general. So while there may be a downward ripple in some of the separate communications that are going out from lobbying overall, there's, I would say, an uptick. I don't know exactly how we could calculate it. We could go to the number of social media posts that have been going out that are specific to lobbying. But for every period, there's a focus, a weekly focus on those filing deadlines, as well as tips and points about aspects of everything we do, but including the lobbying division's work.
We launch the newsletter as soon as we get the approval with Constant Contact, which unfortunately has taken longer on ITS's end, but we've recently let them know that we're very eager and they've been moving that along. And once we have that ability, we'll be able to get out more emails through Constant Contact as well as newsletters. So that has been a little bit delayed because of ITS's slowness on their end to approve the application that we would like to use, but we're hoping we'll get that in.
And which will be much more cost effective once we're able to use it, and less confining, and give Emily and her team much more latitude in the kinds of messaging they can do through emails once we have Constant Contact.
I want to add that once we get that additional sort of capability, not only will we see an increase in the number of sort of push outs of information regarding lobbying, but also, and perhaps just as importantly on the ethics side, we'll be able to get much more information that last year's figures may have reflected having been pushed out in an e-blast or a publication. Now all of that work is being coordinated through communications for a tighter managed communications plan.
Right, and we're also working on, we've been working on what we're calling like ethics at a glance, it'll be lobbying at a glance, which will be the shorter kind of summary in that plain language with links to if they want more information. We'll be pushing those out through newsletters too, and we're creating a page that will house them all in one place, that'll link other places. So we're moving forward with the communications plan items that we put in there. It's just on the newsletter part, it is taking a little bit longer.
Okay.
I have another question.
Sure.
Going on page 1, investigation. I note that it appears that neither, while we were JCO, we have not sent out any guidance letters. And it's still a line there, but for the entire period, it's a 0. Is that something we're going to continue to send out? It's been 0 all year. What is happening?
Yeah, I mean, the guidance letters are, and I don't want to get ahead of Brian and his team in investigations on this, but the guidance letters are part of the endpoint in an investigation and enforcement proceeding. There's also a new provision in ECRA that allows abbreviation of certain proceedings in certain circumstances that can conclude with a guidance letter. So you will see, obviously we have to discuss these specifically we're required by law to discuss those in executive session. But the answer is yes, there will be guidance letters, subject to the Commission's approval.
But none so far this year.
There have been none so far this year because of the nature of the way we've been thus far concluding investigations. We'll talk about it in much finer detail in executive session. But the answer is yes, there will be.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments on the operations update?
I just wanted to add one
Sure.
thing. I kind of skimmed over it. The numbers are quite good. We're not where we want to be in overall training yet. It's going to take a while to ramp up to that. We're going to talk about it a little bit in subsequent parts of the agenda. But it's a tremendous accomplishment to get to the numbers that we saw for last year and the numbers we're seeing this year. And it's a tribute not only to the efforts of our training staff, which have been extraordinary, but also the amount of effort that the ethics officers and the others who are doing training at the 380 plus agencies who are subject to this new requirement are
So
doing.
we-
So really,
we're 81,000 plus?
81,000 plus so far this year, plus 25,000 last year. We'll talk about our goals overall. Ultimately, we have to train, or the entire workforce, executive workforce has to be trained in some way every year. That's what we're approaching. But the numbers are building.
Right. Other comments, questions? All right, so should we go to staffing and recruiting?
Yes, we're making excellent progress. We're getting near. We haven't quite completed filling out the expanded staffing plan, but we're getting there. The training unit now has 3 training associates on board, 1 promotion, 2 new hires, 2 of whom are here. I think we've announced them before. Tammy Cannon and Mike Smith are here.
Hi. Hi.
Welcome.
I think you may have seen some of them on some of the things that we've done. The ethics group, I think, is approaching extending an offer for a deputy, but that process is moving along. There's still a couple of ethics attorneys. The group is recruiting for investigations and enforcement, has 1 more position to fill. Otherwise, they've got there, and Brian will talk a little bit about that later on in the meeting. And administration, do we have 1 more, Mariana? We just had a new hire.
Just have the one, yes, that was, yeah.
So we do have a few more positions to fill, but we're almost there. It's making a difference, I think, in the operations of the agency. I think it's already showing in the statistics. It's certainly showing in the workflow of the agency. And when we talk about, get into more detail on next year's budgeting, you'll see there's some decisions to make about how to adjust the plan, because we've had at least 3 internal moves from existing positions to some of the new positions we've created. Commissioner.
Given the number of new hires that we've had in the last couple of months and it's still projected, do we have any special training program overall for those new hires, or is it just an individual one-on-one when people arrive?
Each group, of course, there's an orientation as individuals come in to the agency, but the basic training is undertaken by the specific group or division that they're coming into.
So the training program that you had a couple of months ago for the whole staff missed that group of people?
That's true, but we plan to
That's what I'm
repeat it, and we've actually hired the individual who conducted that training for us. Mike is now on staff with us.
Okay.
We liked that training so much.
Okay.
It was so effective.
God only knows what will happen if we have a meeting with the head of the FBI or something. We'll see.
No, but we're in good shape when it comes to that. We're a little bit ahead of that curve. So we actually feel very good about that. We're very pleased to have We're very pleased to have Tammy as well. And that's it on that aspect of it.
So any questions? Staffing? All right, budget update?
The budget update, and you have some additional materials too that Mariana has distributed. We're on track almost to use up the entire budget, notwithstanding the amount of time it's taken to expand the staff. And we've been very careful in our recruiting and deliberate, and we've gotten excellent people as a result of it. But the projection you'll see is that we'll be spending in excess of $7 million total. We're on the negative end on non-personal services. Expenses have gone up for various things that we do. Everybody's working hard to find alternative ways to reduce cost, but we're there. We will be able to, we believe, we have in the past, don't expect an exception, to move unutilized personal services dollars over to the non-personal services side to cover that shortfall. That shouldn't be an issue. But we're going to be in the green at the end of the year. However, for next year, it's going to be tighter because we'll have the full staffing plan, maybe with some adjustments. We're going to have to ask for an increase. I'm getting to the next item. which is under the next tab.
Let's see if there are any questions on the current budget, and then we'll go to the 24-25 budget. Anything on this current budget?
I guess,
Sherry, what's,
I guess the building contractual
can you speak up
services,
just a little bit for us?
I'm just interested in knowing a little bit about how we're doing on the budget with regard to technology, and the potential impact next year given pending reductions. I guess, is it embedded in contractual?
We're using ITS, the State Information Technology Service, for our needs. So that part of what we do is actually taken care of through their budget. I don't know, are there additional items, Mariana, other than, with hardware, obviously, we're responsible for?
Yeah, the
And-
only thing on the books right now is new equipment for Albany and our New York City office for the video conferencing.
And where does it show up on the where's on the line item on the budget? Where is
It will
it?
show up under equipment. That's weird. The bulk of it, you'll see the 34,150 in fourth quarter.
All right.
That's what we've gotten so far as investment.
Okay.
But we're not,
Commissioner Edwards, does that answer your?
I mean, there's one exception. We do have a 3-year contract with a dedicated contractor working with our ITS team. That did come out of our budget, and we were able to use funds from last year.
And where does that show up in the budget?
It was showing up in last year's budget. We put it through last year.
I see.
And
Okay.
it showed up, did it show up as personal services? It showed up, no, it was contractual services. It was under contractual services, but we were able to shift money over. So that, and that's prepaid.
I'm just
For
concerned
the
with-
next 2.5 years. Actually, it's going to be 3 years. I don't think the individual's actually on board yet.
So in essence, we're not.
So we're not paying,
So
we
the
paid for
changes
that.
that we need to make to accommodate the new volume, but technology that is not being paid for out of our budget.
Currently, no. Now we may want to, and we'll talk about this when we get into more detail, not at this meeting, but probably at subsequent meetings and at committee meetings. There may be things we want to do
Right.
that cannot be fully provided to us by ITS because of limitations on, that they have in terms of staff. Or the-
That's the number I'm interested in knowing more about at some point. Because
Yeah.
so much of what our work is contingent on technology, and we don't need any impediments.
No, understood, and that's clearly something, we want to talk about throughout the agency, where there are areas where there are, for example, new technologies that can't be supplied or created by ITS, or they can't do it efficiently or in a timetable that suits our needs, where it would make more sense to go outside to providers, and that will have a budgetary, that will absolutely have a budgetary impact. We have to think about that, but for now. Through the end of this fiscal year, which will end at the end of March 2024, we're not anticipating having any extrinsic IT type of costs that will hit our budget that way. Although staff may be looking at me, maybe folks have some ideas about going outside.
But we can
Emily?
anticipate reductions from.
So we
the
need to
outside
speak
budget.
up so people can hear us.
So we need,
Right.
we need to,
Yeah.
so we can anticipate deductions from whatever budget we're drawing from for this during next fiscal year.
It could happen. I mean, there are things that are hitting the budget. For example, we have web hosting costs that come out of our budget. So the lobbying ethics training that we put up had to be hosted by a service that's charging us for that. So that is hitting the budget. And we were projecting over the 2-year cycle, was it 26,000, Carol? For that over the 2 years. So over the 2-year cycle, but it was going to be front-ended, obviously, in this year because
Right.
it's a 3-year training cycle. For some odd reason, they structured it that way, even though we have biennial registrations. So that's going to hit. For workforce ethics training, we're looking at workarounds so that we don't, because we're talking about 300,000 people, and doing it online, 150,000 a year. If we alternate the training, that's $2 for each individual. So we're looking at other ways of doing that. to avoid that hitting our budget. And I don't know, Emily, are there other technology costs that we're trying to get around them by
There-
contracting with
Yeah, we have smaller costs for, social media.
social media subscriptions and things?
Yeah, constant contact we'll have, but they're
Right, but if we were using the existing service, I don't want to name it,
Okay.
it's more costly.
Right.
So we're trying to get those costs down.
Vice Chair Austin has a question.
Really more of a comment. I'm looking under travel with the 2024 estimate of,
Page and 10.
well, it's the singular page
Got it.
of the budget. The very last line shows travel reimbursement of close to $30,000. And I would note that for our agenda and legislative goals in this coming year, we'll be addressing to some greater or lesser extent in-person meetings under the open meetings law versus utilizing technology for committee meetings. I wonder if we could break out the numbers to show how much is spent for committee meetings where people have to actually come and get reimbursed as opposed to do it virtually and live stream so that the public is certainly still involved. But we save money and perhaps can put that into technology or education or wherever else we need it. It seems like a terrible waste of money.
Is that true that it's mostly not employed? This is all commission for travel?
No,
How does, okay.
no.
So it doesn't have, right, so,
It's not exclusively.
okay.
It's not exclusively.
Oh,
So it
it's other
would be
travel.
interesting at some point to see the breakdown
Right.
yeah.
and to see what we're paying for.
Yeah, we'll provide that at the next meeting.
Great.
That- That's,
Okay.
that's not a,
Excellent. All right,
it's not hard to do.
anything else on the current budget?
Chair Davy, I have a question.
Sure, go ahead, Commissioner James.
Looking at the quarterly projections, we have the actual disbursements for the first quarter, and then the projections for the rest of the year. What was the budgeted amount for the first quarter? And then that's my first question. And then the second question is, it looks like for the second quarter, we would be exceeding the 1745921 figure based upon what our expenditures were in August, which is about 800,000. So I think with that and July, assuming that we continue it at that rate, we'd be at about 2 million for the second quarter. So am I reading that right?
Yeah, I mean, no, you're reading it correctly. However, there's a bump in those months. Two things are happening. Our payroll is going up because our staffing is going up. So the numbers that you're seeing from, say, April have increased because of additional staffing. Payroll is bigger. But also August was a 3 payroll month.
I see.
So that adds 50% right off the bat
Okay.
to the total. And then there's some additional charges. We had increments that were paid to all employees in the state and other things that hit. So the number is going to go down
In September.
for September,
Okay.
for the end of the quarter. And then I don't know if we have do we have another month before the end of the calendar year? I'm sure we're going to have another month before the end of the fiscal year with the 3 payrolls. Probably have 2.
Every third month.
Yeah, they're 2 per year.
No, January will be our next 3.
Yeah, January's going to hit. I saw that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if we have. So January, I don't know if we're going to hit it. I don't think in March. So we'll have one more month like that.
Okay.
All right, any other questions on the budget? Current budget? All right, hearing none, the budget for the next fiscal year, 24-25.
All right, we now have the call from the Division of Budget for our budget requests for the next fiscal year, which we'll be calling 2024-25. I think the legislature will as well, but the executive chamber, I think, is going to call it the 2025 budget. We are, as I said, anticipating we will need an increase in non-personal services, depending upon how recruiting goes and where we decide to go in terms of backfilling for those positions where the individuals have moved within the agency. We may or may not need additional money on the personal services side. And it's also going to depend upon mandatory increases through the year, which we can't control, and which will come from the state. In terms of the kinds of things that Commissioner Edwards brought up, additional technology needs, things where we'll want to look outside our current, say, relationship with ITS, where we're going to be incurring costs. That would hit on the NPS side, the non-personal services side. But we're going to need money there in any event to meet our operating needs.
Questions on the new budget? Commissioner Cardozo.
Just related to that, though, is given the letter that was attachment E from the Division of Budget and our all general knowledge that the state may have a significant problem budget-wise, do we have to start anticipating that we won't be able to, the legislature won't be able to grant us the requested increases, and do we have to start thinking about what we do in that connection?
I have approached it from the perspective of, yes, that could happen. They're talking about a flat submission. That doesn't mean they're going to give us flat. It could be negative. But we hope it means, at the very least, they're thinking flat. I've already had at least a preliminary discussion along the lines of we may need more money, and it's important as we move forward to have that additional money.
And I would say that it's really incumbent upon us to make a full push for everything that we need and not to relent until we absolutely have to.
And if we do relent, we need to be real clear about the objectives we won't be able to achieve.
Sure.
We have to realign our overall long-term plan or short-term plan with regard to the budget allocation that we receive.
Absolutely. And I was going to ask if myself, Vice Chair Austin, Commissioner James serve as kind of a sounding board working group on the budget with Executive Director Berlin and staff.
Right.
And then he'll bring a full budget proposal back here for a robust discussion among the commissioners when we get there. But if there's no objection to that, then we'll just be there as that working group and a sounding board for him and his team as they go forward. Any comments on that? I just want to make sure it's reflected on the minutes that this small working group will be put in place.
There's no female on that group.
Commissioner Edwards, was that you volunteering to join the group?
I don't mind volunteering, but I think it should be.
All right.
There should be some female representation.
All right. I think the group now includes Commissioner Edwards, Vice Chair Austin, Commissioner James, and myself. Thank you. All right.
All right, thank you. The next item, per diem payments to commissioners pursuant to the commission's resolution on the payment of per diem reimbursements for commission meetings, committee meetings, and preparation time.
Do we have a tab or a sheet on that?
We don't. I was going to,
Just
as we have in the past, I'm going to read it into the record, and then we will post the figures as called for by the resolution. But for August, the amounts paid, and these largely track, they're off by a matter of cents for the most part, with a couple of exceptions. The numbers that we announced would likely be, at the July meeting, would likely be paid in August. Commission Chair Davey, $3,834.44. These are the August per diems, and for September, $2,172.78. Vice Chair Austin, August, $2,811.98, $990.53. In September, Commissioner Ayers, $4,377.71 in August, $2,204.73 in September. Commissioner Caraballo, $3,291.22 in August, $1,405.91 in September. Commissioner Cardozo, $7,892.77 in August, $3,738.44 in September. Commissioner Carney was reimbursed prior to his resignation. $3,419.08 in August, $1,693.48 in September. Commissioner Edwards, $796.90 in August, $3,482.82 in September. Commissioner Groenwegen, $2,108.96 in August, $734.91 in September. Commissioner James, $3,355.18 in August, $1,214.20 in September. Commissioner Whittigate, $7,093.85 in August and $702.96 in September. The totals for August are $45,982.09 and $18,340.76 for September. And I should say this August payments include the April and May committee meetings, April, May, and June commission meetings, April and May preparation time. And in addition, Commissioner Whittingham had provided her time, preparation time for January through March, so that was added to the amount that she received. It's in the figure that I recited. And for September, that's the July commission meeting, and the June and July preparation time.
Okay. Comments?
And we'll post these following the meeting.
Questions?
I just want to reiterate, because I think you've answered my question, but that it's clear that the amounts that you are reporting represents the amounts that were paid. It doesn't necessarily cover the time. It includes multiple months of work.
Yeah, he did mention that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just a monthly
Right.
amount, but it's multiple months in
Right.
both cases. Yeah. And only covers a fraction of the work that I think any of us does for this commission, but that's another discussion another time. Commissioner Whittingham.
No, I was just wondering if I need it, I'm not sure all commissioners need it. I just like to see what it is that is being submitted, and from time to time sometimes I don't receive it, just so I can keep track, because
Sure.
it seems at times like I'm not quite sure what this is for, what I'm supposed to submit, so, and I know I haven't submitted for some months, but I just want to be able to keep track, and then I can do it consistently going forward.
I agree.
So yes, Martha and I are working on a system to capture all that information and distribute it once we know the actual that's been paid, and be more consistent with that and provide that information.
I would like to just have, not just the payments, but what the meetings or what the time is. Just because I can't reconcile my time because.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Could you repeat that? Just couldn't hear it.
So I would like to receive a sheet, I guess, of the time that has been submitted for us automatically.
Oh,
So what it
Right,
looks
because if
like.
I don't put it in, time does not, it's not reconciled, because there's what I put in and then there's what is automatic.
We can circulate that, or figure out a way to make it available
Thank you.
in a dynamic way so that you can check on it.
That's right. Thanks.
Yeah, Mariana and her team are keeping track of all of that in very fine detail, so we have that.
Okay, other questions or comments? All right, annual report?
It's here only to say that the annual report, since our last meeting was issued, and from my perspective, it was, I think, well received. Generally, it was extremely informative. I want to thank not just Emily and her team who pulled it all together, but but everyone in every group and all the directors for their excellent work in capturing the work that they've done and pulling together all the data. I thought it was extremely impressive. It was certainly extremely long on top of that, but it was quite impressive.
Yeah, and it did generate quite a bit of public comment in a number of different media circles and other circles as well, as I saw. So thank you, and thanks to the team. Other comments, questions on the annual report? It's a lot of good work. All right. Are we ready to move to committee reports? All right, so I'm assuming nothing from administration. We'll talk a little bit more about some things related to that later.
Yeah, I just want to say, with respect to administration, the comments where I'd say not substantive as such that we received in the public hearing. And so, and Commissioner Ayers and I had talked about this. There wasn't particularly anything to bring back. I mean, there was one proposal, I think, that we assigned to administration that talked about tying the commission's budget as a percentage of the overall state budget. And it's something to look at and think about, but the implications are such that we want to spend a fair amount of time considering how that would possibly work and looking at experience in other states and working with that.
Could I just add?
Sure.
So since I agreed to become chair of the committee, we haven't had a meeting yet. Staff tried to find a time that worked in September, was unable to find a time that worked for everybody, and then we were adjourned. So I'm hoping that we'll have a meeting in October, and the major items that are on our agenda, just so that folks know what Chair Davey has asked us to look at, and in case folks have feedback, are number one, the various things related to committee procedures. Chair Davey asked if we could, since there's now multiple pending proposals related to committee and to some extent overall commission procedures, as I understand the charge, it's take a look at what's working, what isn't, and try to come back with a proposal that makes sense overall, rather than doing these various things piecemeal. So if folks are interested in that, please reach out to me and let me know. So right now, sort of circulating, there's the document called committee procedures, commission procedures?
It's commission meeting procedures.
Meeting procedures, thank you. Meeting procedures that's in our package for today that we're not going to talk about today because it's being sent to this committee. There's also the proposal that I drafted in May on committee procedures, which has been bouncing around and discussed, and people have various concerns about it. So those two proposals, plus the sort of ongoing question of whether the model of working groups, where instead of having a standing committee, you just ask folks to do stuff, is a more effective model overall, and whether we should have more of that and less of the sort of standing committee. So those are the three committee-related issues that are on my list of things for us to look at. We were just thinking it makes sense to look at that all together.
My only concern about that is I thought that we voted on the committee structure already. So why are we now looking at it as,
we did,
why are
but
we
also
including that into the proposal?
But we agreed that we would revisit it in January.
Okay.
So we're asking them to get a jump on it for us.
And consistent with the open processes that we did agree to, if anybody's interested in that, please let me know, and I'll make sure to include you in those conversations, because we're interested in including everybody. The other major issue that I think that I'm aware of is the need to have a process for evaluating the executive director. And just as a matter of good government, that's something we need to have in place, and my understanding is at this point we don't. So we'll be looking at what other comparable organizations do and trying to come back with a proposal on how that should work.
And can I assume that the process for evaluating staff would be part of the process for evaluating the executive director?
I don't think so, because I think that's beyond the reach of the commission.
That's what I'm saying, it should be, instead of, it should be delegated to the executive director.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think it is, yeah,
Okay.
sure, absolutely. Thanks. Okay,
And I'll just say, if anybody has other issues that they think we should be looking up, please let me know. We will try again to get a meeting time
Well-
scheduled.
I wonder whether it makes sense to have, self-evaluation of commissioners.
let's put it on the agenda.
I will add it to the list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boards generally do some self-evaluation, self-report, so it's not unheard of. Yeah, all right, could be a good practice. Okay. Other comments then on the administration committee? Commissioner James, anything on the ethics committee? I think you might be on mute, Commissioner James.
Is it your plan to go through the recommendations from the public hearing that we're going to, or is that, are we going to do that at another time?
I think we do that at another time.
Okay. Then there's no report other than that at this time.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. Carol, are you going to say anything about the lobbying committee? Okay.
Sure, I can give you a brief or detailed. I'll start with brief, and then if you have any questions.
Okay. And this is our director of lobbying,
Yeah, and let me know if anybody.
Carol Quinn.
So I passed out a chart.
And summary is fine.
Summary's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Passed out a chart, but in the interest of time and also just to make it a little easier to understand, a lot of the comments were repeated or, so what I'm going to speak about right now are the categories of comments. And so we received, and this was back in March, we received a lot of comments about the ethics training for lobbyists and clients and the difficulty with certifying. So now the education committee had a meeting and addressed a lot of these topics, and Marlena Diaz and I worked together to help formulate your action plan. So I'm completely on board with your suggestions. So I can go through those, but basically what I would just highlight from that is that, we are in favor. So there was some difficulty with all of the thousands of individual lobbyists remembering their passwords and figuring out how to certify. A suggestion was made, and I'm in favor of it, of allowing the CAO of the entity to certify for all of their individual lobbyists. That would address a major concern and also can be done without legislation, and it would address a major concern voiced. And since the training in the Lobbying Act is every 3 years for lobbyists, and in Executive Law 94 added clients to that but didn't put a time frame, we are adhering to the 3-year deadline in the requirement to get training in the Lobbying Act. So since that's not, most people have already taken it. We have about an 82% compliance rate right now, even though we don't have a penalty. So that's pretty good. Most people that need to take training have. And so they'll have to take it again in 3 years. So we have time to change this certification process, and we would be in favor of doing that. The other thing that I would highlight is that we are supportive of a legislative change to add, and we're recommending late fees for compliance. We would like that. Another comment that I have progress on is OpenNY. So all of the massive lobbying data sets have been sent over to OpenNY. They should be, it should be live within mid-October, we're thinking. Is that right? Ish. It is a huge win for transparency and the agency. I have to highlight Marlena Diaz, who worked tirelessly on this and really helped. I did some of it, but 95% of this work was her. And this is, again, a huge win. It's the biggest data set in the state on OpenNY, and their complex data analytics will be able, for people who understand how to do that, this is going to be great for them. So that's great. The other progress I have to report is, and we did get comments on how you cannot terminate a contract through the lobby application. There was no term buttons. And so I hate to put a date on it, but we are trying to launch it next Wednesday, a week from today, October 4th, and that is, again, a huge project. There's a lot of effort over the summer in the past few months, and so that should.
And does that mean terminating a relationship with a lobbyist?
So a lobbyist registration with a client, the contract between the two, that can be terminated automatically now. So if you terminate early, you can hit the, I'm going to make it easy to say, hit the term button on our application and terminate it. If it terminates pursuant to the contract, whatever the end date is in that contract, the system will automatically terminate it for the lobbyist. So,
And what are the implications for reporting on a contract that's terminated early? Does that change anything?
well, what we normally do when we launch something in the lobby application is then after that, we give it a couple weeks and then we work on the reporting. And so there should be, reports we'll be able to more easily to run, indicating.
But in terms
contracts.
of the requirements of either the lobbyist or the client, does anything change when a contract is terminated early, or do all the rules and regs still apply?
All of the rules and regs still apply.
What's the importance or the significance of being able to show that a contract is terminated early?
Well, for transparency, to know that so we will get questions about contracts, and so, it is whatever the biggest topic is of the day, who's lobbying on that, and who
Okay.
is still engaged.
That's very
who's
helpful.
engaged to lobby, and so, the press, the media, or other industry groups are interested in knowing what contracts are still live and which aren't.
That's very helpful. All right. Any other questions for anything else? Thank you.
The other thing I will mention is that the Lobbying Act, a change to the Lobbying Act about Senate confirmations and that being part of the lobbying definition. That passed both houses. It hasn't been signed yet.
No.
But we will have to deal with incorporating that, which will be time consuming.
Sure.
We will do that when that happens.
Mr. Cardozo.
I just want to comment, reflecting the views of the Communications Committee. I think what Carol just said answers a large number of the issues that were raised at the public hearing. And I think if you go through them, when we analyzed them, we said, well, it's subject to cost and burden and so forth. And I think what Carol has just outlined really answers that question. So it sounds to me like we really have responded, in effect, to a number of the comments along these lines that were made at the public hearing. I think it's just terrific that we're able to do this.
That's great. Thank you.
That's the highlight. So I can answer any of the questions, but that's the highlight of what the lobbying group
Right.
is doing.
Thank you.
I just didn't hear fully what you said about what's been passed by both houses. Is that another category of lobbying for appointment?
The legislation changes the definition of lobbying to add to the definition of lobbying, attempts to influence state positions that require Senate confirmation.
So that would be like the Court of Appeals.
Like I say, there's these one is just the activities, so that includes a specified group that's actually of activities that are actually lobbying that you need to report on. This would add to that list any activity to attempt to influence a position that requires Senate confirmation. So, assuming that gets signed, we will have to implement that into, our review process and also the lobby application.
And then my second question is, I just wanted to hear more about what the open meeting is. Like, if that means that we'll have a platform.
So OpenNY is a platform of pretty much, it's a large platform of data for agencies in the state. And so, it's a way for the public to go on OpenNY and find data of agencies throughout the state. And so to get, our data sets are so large in lobbying, like I said, it's going to be it's bigger than DMV's data. If you picture how many licenses there are in the state and things like that. So it's a huge amount, and we had to do a lot of, and like I said, Marlene, there's credit on this, figuring out how to even divide up the data sets to get them even to the system was crashing trying to get it over there. So It will be, it will allow, so we have the public search query that we, I gave you a tutorial on, and that's on our website. So that's an easy way of finding out who's lobbying who on what. And that's great. But if you really want to know real data analytics, complex things that I don't even understand necessarily how to do, but people do, and they'll be able to do that. So we're covering all our bases. We'll have the PSQ that can handle a lot of the data analytics, but if you want real complex data analytics to be done, they'll be able to go to OpenNY and get all the information about compensation and expenses and you name it. They can figure things out to get the data they're looking for, and so certain groups, maybe some good government groups might want to know that information. Certainly the media has requested that information, so I'm hoping that in Media 2 that you can find out anything you want to find out about lobbying.
But it allows you to slice and dice the data in ways that our public search query doesn't allow you to do right now because of its limited functionality.
Exactly.
Other questions or comments? Sounds great. Thank you. Education? Commissioner Edwards?
Yeah, I'm going to defer to Executive Director to do our report on behalf.
Could you speak up, please?
Yeah, she's deferring to Executive Director Berlin. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank
I think
Just
she.
want to know, we circulated the documents, updated our action plan, and he's going to report out on how we're recommending to dispose of the questions that were assigned to us from the hearing.
And let me say, the committee has done a good deal of work, quite a bit of work under the leadership of Commissioner Edwards. It's been quite extensive. There was a very robust presentation at the last commission meeting on the committee's proposed charter, on its action plan, and on its goals for implementing the statewide workforce side ethics training requirements. And in terms of the recommendations that were made at the hearing, I think at the last meeting there was discussion about having some more specific deadlines for various aspects and check-in points of the recommendations. And there are essentially four. The first was ethics officers have been asking, and the number of requests has increased for flexibility in editing the ethics training that we provide to them, to adapt the trainings to the needs of their specific workforces. And in fact, training staff has created a somewhat condensed, usually the somewhat condensed version of the comprehensive ethics training course for ethics officers to use, and that we're using depending upon the responsibilities of the individuals who are being trained. Having said that, our training group, our ethics division, is not at this point prepared to depart too substantially from the minimum requirements that we believe are necessary to satisfy the requirements of the statute for comprehensive ethics training of the workforce. The plan, however, is to develop guidelines or regulations by the end of the second quarter of 2024 for ethics officers who request the opportunity to make changes, particularly changing
People can't hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. But particularly changing examples that are more pertinent to their particular agency's work. And we also need to discuss at the education committee level, processes for agencies that want to shorten or make other changes in the request to have those passed on. And again, the goal is to do that by the first by the end of the second quarter of 2024, and the other by the end of this year, to have that mechanism in place. The requests are coming in. There's a request for a streamlined training for general employees, which presumably refers to those who are not in white-collar positions, and the ability to swap out various things. And it fits into the same mode of considering exceptions to the requirement. And we'd be on the same schedule, second calendar quarter of next year for a formalized process, informal process by the end of this year. There was a request to be able to use a pure online training to deliver what's now required to be live, whether in person or live online training. Staff does not think that's something we have the latitude. We don't necessarily endorse it either, but it's not something that we currently have the latitude to do under the statute. The statute's very specific that the training falls into two components: a live in-person or online training in year one, and a refresher course, which is and can be online in year two, and then a resumption in the third year of online training. To the extent there's some way, and we'll look at our experience as it evolves over the next couple of years in terms of the efficacy of the training, coming up with, and this is another thing that we've talked about, metrics for measuring the efficacy and the success of the training programs. Whether it would be possible to go to a pure online approach to these kinds of things. There may be other steps that would have to be taken to do that, and then we'll assess whether to make a legislative recommendation.
A pure online that's not live.
That's not live.
Right.
For example, the training group will be rolling out, has completed the preparation, and is now in the process of mounting in various learning management systems a pure online course that's extremely well done. It has little test modules built into it, and it's very, very effective, but it's an online course. It's not a live course. It's not a monitored course, and there isn't an opportunity for question and answer, which is specifically required by the statute for live courses. So we think it's effective. We think it's comprehensive, but it doesn't satisfy the statutory requirement. We'll, to the extent we can measure the efficacy and develop metrics for that, and we will. We'll do that, and then we'll come back and look at it. And then the last suggestion was that commissioners personally participate in ethics training. Staff recommended perhaps having greetings included from commissioners in it. I think there was a sense among commissioners the last time this was discussed as a group to create an opportunity for actually live participation. So we'll start looking at introducing commissioners. We'll work out a rotation and a module to do that beginning at the beginning of 2024.
Commissioner Woods?
Did we not discuss the idea of going out to sites?
Yes, it's part of the live. Yeah, it's part of the live training, and we would be coordinating that. The training group is looking at doing. I'll call it a lunch and learn, but setting up sessions, for example, in Albany, that would be open to the entire workforce, or as many as we could accommodate, and do training sessions like that. And that would present an opportunity for commissioners to be present. And as we get more experience under our belt, and our new trainers have the opportunity to expand their horizons, we'll create other opportunities for live in-person trainings by our agency.
I was concerned when I had looked at the prior ethics training that there really was not a mandatory requirement that people stay online on the online training, that you could click and get out and still get credit for having attended. And I think I got a response that, we were working on that. But this all sounds great on paper, but if the person can click on and then immediately click out, it's meaningless. And so I had suggested that be.
Yes, and following up on that suggestion, the online course that the training group has created does have test modules built into it, and you have to answer the questions. You don't necessarily have to get them right, so it's not.
Fortunately.
That's the next.
But it does tell you if you've gotten it wrong, so it's instructional. You don't you don't just get passed on. You get a little reminder when you do it. There are systems. And we started to look at the technology, and we have to spend more time. We wanted to get this up. We're looking at the technologies that are out there where you simply can't go on until you get it right. Now, can you have somebody, your friend who's an ethicist standing behind you whispering in your ear?
Yeah.
You could, I mean, if you want to go to that, if you have a friend who can teach you that, that's, you don't need maybe to have the module, just have them teach you personally one-on-one. But we're looking at those, and for the live things too, you know, you have to put the codes in periodically. But we're hoping people, and it's our goal to give folks an incentive to take the training seriously. We take it seriously, and it's an important part of the work process.
All right.
May I ask, will these documents be posted on our website for the public to see the exact responses we're giving to their recommendations? Recommendation that we do.
You know, we're going to talk about, not the next item, but we'll get to the round table. The purpose of the round table is in part, not exclusively, but in part, to create the opportunity for commissioners directly to communicate. And we'll have materials in conjunction. Emily will be talking about how the round table is the follow-up with interested parties in a public setting. It'll be online to communicate what our responses are to the recommendations.
Let me propose this, because I think it's a question that requires some more consideration. So I would propose that you and Emily talk about it, and then talk about it with the executive director, and let's see if it's practical, and if it is, how do we do it? We may have to do it in phases, because there were a lot of questions there. But I do think it's worth considering, if it's
I mean, I'm fine with that, I don't understand. Well, you want to go through a roundtable, I mean, they ask specific questions.
Right.
And I think we should respond to the specific questions they ask.
Right.
And post it.
Well, the question is, do we have the bandwidth to do it in a timely manner? And I think that needs to be explored, it would seem to me.
And I mean, that's exactly right. The other purpose of the roundtable is then to get further feedback on what our proposed responses are. So it's not the end of the process, and it would make eminent sense once we finish the roundtable process, then to prepare, to post how we've dealt with it, because it's not quite there, and it's the opportunity to have that interaction.
Right, and part of the roundtable will be giving an update to the interested parties, like Carol did, on like the progress we've made. Right, so like at the beginning, say this is all that we've done in response to your comments, and then talk about, what's moving on to the legislative agenda. But I'll explain all that.
Sure, okay. Anything else on education? We're good, thank you.
An overview of what the roundtable.
We're going to do that. We're going to do that in a minute. Yeah. So the one other adjustment that we should have made in the agenda was a report from the legislative working group that Commissioner Cardozo is leading. If there's no objection, we'll hear from him now. All right? Yeah.
What was the legislative working group? Do you?
I don't know.
Yeah, so we talked about it at the last meeting. Commissioner Cardozo, do you want to?
We talked about it last week. What happened was, we talked about it at the special meeting.
At the special
meeting. And we
meeting.
decided we couldn't do it, given the legality of, you were going to talk about appointing working groups, I think. But we had held on doing that because of the legal stuff?
No, I don't
I don't
recall
remember
that.
then.
We
that
we
what
were not.
happened?
As I understand it, though, with all the discussions we've been having on all these items, that obviously a large number of
Will you talk about who you're working with?
Right, well, I'm sorry. We have a committee, which we obviously haven't, we were supposed to meet during then the injunction interfered with us, of Seymour and I forget who the other person was.
I think I was going
It was Ava. We're going to take the various issues that we've identified that we think that we favor and that we can't move, though, without legislation. And we got to put together a package of proposals to the legislature no later than early January, that would say, we think that we should have legislation in areas A, B, C, D. And so we would try to formulate that after we finished, I think after our meeting today, we will have a better idea. And I would be with the committee, working to identify specifically what those issues were, and then working with staff to say, hey, if we do need legislation to require candidates to put their resources online, and assuming we favor that, I'm just using that as an example, then we would work with the staff to identify that, articulate that, and we would go through that on each of the various items. So I'm really not prepared to discuss this, and maybe after the roundtable discussion in a little while we'll have a better idea. But we want to be in a position to say, all right, we want legislation A, B, C, D, E, and then we have to be sure we're following through on getting that before the legislature.
So we're going to talk about another working group in a minute. I think that the notion here is that we won't set up any more committees because we said we wanted to revisit the committee structure in January. And so we have some temporary things that need to get done. We're going to talk about it with regard to the comprehensive review, and there'll be a proposal about a working group for that. All of these working groups will sunset, and it may be that when we discuss this in January, that rather than having the committee structure we currently have, we'll go to this working group structure instead. It's on not making any decisions now. But in the interim, rather than saying we'll have a legislative committee or a committee on comprehensive review, just set up working groups, or even on the budget. So there's a working group on the budget, there'll be a working group on legislation, a working group on comprehensive review. All these things will sunset at the end of the activity, and then in January we can have a more deliberate discussion about how we go forward, whether we want committees, whether we want working groups, or some combination of those, or some other structure.
So for example, right now, the Communications Committee
Right.
is looking at legislative changes to the open meetings law. So is that something now that the Legislative Committee is taking over?
Yes.
And so the Communications Committee won't be working on that? Because I was sort of working on that
Yes,
one.
well,
So, okay.
Yes.
So I should give my work to, I guess I'll give it to you, Michael, and you'll do it as well.
but I can't
No, I
remember,
think
there's a
that-
third
yeah.
person that was going to be on the communication, on the legislative committee, besides Seymour and me, and I just can't.
It's Ava, Commissioner.
Oh, Zava, right, okay.
But the idea is that
Done.
I think that no commissioner should assume that their views won't be fully incorporated into these conversations and discussions. I mean, it's just impossible for us to go forward on anything without a full and formal vote and discussion of this commission. So I don't want anybody to feel like they're going to be left out or cut out of any kind of process. That's just not going to happen.
But I'm just,
It just won't.
but I'm thinking
And,
this,
and nothing will proceed in terms of a legislative agenda, in terms of comprehensive review.
There's just like a lot of committees or working groups or stuff that all of us are not aware of.
That's
And there
that's
seems to be
absolutely, and
some
all of us
people
are
who know
not
what's
in,
going on.
and all of us
some
are not
who don't.
involved
I'm
in.
sorry, I can't hear you.
And I said, and all of us are not involved in.
Okay.
Right, and we can't move this really dynamic process forward if indeed we can't do any work in between meetings. And sometimes it's just going to mean exercising some discretion, but making sure we keep everybody fully informed when we're all together. But the thing that everybody should rest assured of is that nothing moves forward in any formal way on behalf of this commission that there aren't 6 commissioner votes for. It's just not going to happen. So I don't want anybody to feel like you're going to wake up one morning and read something in the paper that we've done that you didn't know about.
Well,
And
I
that's
think if you
just
could just let us know between commission meetings
Sure.
by email what's
Sure,
happening.
absolutely.
We want this ad hoc
Absolutely.
group.
That's
And
fair.
maybe even put out there, does anyone want to be part of this ad hoc
That's
group?
fair.
Instead of just,
That's-
making, because people have different interests on the commission, luckily.
That's
'cause
fair.
There's a lot of work to be done.
That's fair.
So I think it should be opened up to everyone,
Sure.
and, of course, we
Well-
don't want to have a heavy commission. like
Yeah,
that.
and.
A committee
and-
with more than 6 members.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to do also, right, is just that.
Okay.
Because when we do open it up, then we end up with commission, we end up with
But we can
committees
use
or
our
working
discretion at
groups.
the end and
of all
say,
these.
we have all these people who want to be on this,
Right.
let's.
So we've got a lot of work to do here, right? And it's a way of trying to partial it out and move it forward. And if you hear, so this working group, if you want to be a part of it, then yes, that's absolutely fine. But we need to keep this thing moving, or we'll find ourselves at the end of the year, and we will not have made the progress that we really need to make. But I hear you. I totally hear you.
I think it's,
Commissioner Edwards?
yeah, I just think it's a matter of miscommunications. It is disheartening to hear that the commission was, that a working group was formed at the meeting. And even in the case of Commissioner Dolly, I call you, excuse me, that she was working on something, and now she's not part of that commission. So I think you've got to
Which
coordinate
I'm
that
okay
at the
with,
top.
I just wish I,
If she's working on it
And she,
and didn't know that a working group was formed to take that work, which is fine. I just think it's helpful
Well,
to know
yeah.
before it happens.
so if we have to do that, then we're just simply going to grind to a halt. It's just,
That's so
it's,
many people.
yeah, there's just so much that we have to do. We've got a budget we've got to have done. We've got a legislative agenda we have to have done. We've got a comprehensive review we have to have done. We've got ethics training that we need to do. We've got all these things we have to do by the end of the year. And we need some flexibility and fluidity to get them done. Understanding, again, everything will be fully reported, and nothing will go forward without 6 votes of the commission. Commissioner
So
Myers.
we did resolve in May that any commissioner can attend any committee meeting.
Absolutely.
And that all materials, I think including announcement to the meeting, will be shared with the whole commission, which we can revisit, and I think we are revisiting whether it works. But in the interim, I do think that it's appropriate to, just to circulate a message, say, in between meetings, to say, we formed this group, here's who, I think it's the chair's absolute power to form committees and working groups as the chair sees fit, and in a rapid way when called for, which it often is. But I think that we collectively decided that those groups would be open, and I do think that, there's a recurring sense that some members don't feel included in some of the conversations that are happening. And so I do think it's important to stick to what we resolved in the sense of making sure that everybody has an invitation. Again, I know there was dissent over that. That wasn't what everybody thought was best, but it is what we collectively decided. And I think that in terms of the, well, I'll just say that.
Sure,
Just-
understood. And and we're going to hear in a minute about the suggesting of a working group that includes you, Commissioner Whittingham, and Commissioner Groenewegen and Commissioner Carballo on this issue of the comprehensive review of rules and regulations as well. So everybody's involved in something. Commissioner Whittingham.
Just want to say, Chair Davey, I think what I am hearing and what I may have said at some different point is what you just stated about the working group, the action plan that we're going to discuss. That particular group was formed at a meeting, at an open meeting that we had, and we were discussing it, and then we formed it. If I'm hearing correctly, what Commissioner Edwards and Carabano is saying, and what I may have stated previously, is just it's okay and within your powers and prerogative to formulate these working groups. Disseminate an email, a list. I have formed 3 working groups to take care of budget, to take care of the legislature. It is necessary, and that is just keeping us informed and in the loop, and so when we come to the meeting, it's not the first time that we're hearing it.
So here's the
That's
thing,
what-
I
yes.
agree, I will do that, but like last night, Sandy and I were talking about the budget, the new budget. And he said, you know, we need to move on this, this was unexpected, we got the call, I need somebody to bounce this off of. I said, all right, so let's think about Seymour, Lynn, and myself. I could have and perhaps should have sent that email last night and said, tomorrow, I'm going to suggest da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then I would have probably heard from Commissioner Edwards to say, yeah, that's all male. We don't, I just formed an all-male working, we got an all-female working group, so we got to figure out if we want to do anything about that. But that's enough, but I hear you. So I will try my best. But sometimes the pressures of just wanting to see this stuff move forward and not delay means that some decisions get made, they get reported later, and we try to report them sooner.
And that is fine. In the instance you just said, it's less than 24 hours, we're having a meeting the next morning.
Right.
I did this last night. That is fair game.
Right.
It's when it's been done weeks before, and that's a
Right.
problem.
I wasn't, actually, to be honest with you, I thought we communicated about the legislative working group, but if you guys say we didn't, then we didn't. All right.
Not to us anyway.
Okay. Point well taken. How many times are you gonna, here.
Here's a net.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Understood. All right. Anything else on the legislative working group? Commissioner Cardozo?
No.
Anything else? All right.
Well, we
Vice
have
Chair.
one thing we want to raise in the executive session.
Okay, yes. Okay. All righty then. So we're going to suspend with code of conduct. So actually, why don't we skip the code of conduct for now? Because that's going to take a very long discussion. I think we can deal with the comprehensive review relatively quickly, I hope. So Commissioner Ayers.
Okay, thanks. So, well, I get, so as you know, I circulated a proposal, as I agreed to at the last meeting, suggesting or at this point, we've had so many recent meetings, I'm sure it wasn't the last meeting, but I agreed at a recent meeting to circulate a proposal for how we could proceed with the comprehensive review that's required by our statute. Commissioner Whittingham submitted comments, which I recirculated a couple of days ago, and I've had conversations with other folks. My understanding is that there are further thoughts from staff on that proposal, which I'm looking over at Sandy from because I heard that from Chair Davey. Okay, great. So what Chair Davey suggested was that the working group that we formed originally, which is myself, Commissioner Whittingham, Commissioner Caraballo, and Commissioner Groenwagen, will sit down with staff at a meeting to be scheduled, hopefully fairly soon, although obviously there's a lot of meetings to be scheduled fairly soon. And at this point, I think I have a sense of what most folks think. I haven't had a chance to talk to Commissioner Caraballo about her reactions, but we'll talk about those and whatever additional concerns are at that meeting. And then Chair Davey suggested that that same group continue on after we adopt a plan to, in effect, be the liaison folks to track the progress of that process. Again, we are not meeting to discuss how we're going to review the we're not meeting to discuss what changes anybody might want to make to the regulations. This is purely to help coordinate that process, which I think is a fairly involved process. And so my specific request, I guess, to Sandy would be if there are aspects of the proposal that I drafted that staff think should be changed, fantastic. If you could come to whenever we're able to schedule that meeting with a markup or a substitute. If the plan is bad in toto, that's great with me too. Just come with something written that we can ideally vote to approve at that meeting. If that, and I'm happy to help with any drafting that I can, but I've already drafted what I think works best, so I think the ball is in staff's court, if that makes sense, to come with a written proposal or a markup of the existing proposal?
Yeah, staff has been focusing on the proposal, and
Great.
absolutely will be prepared to do that and to figure out a way to make staff an active part
Yeah.
of the process, of figuring out what the process
Right.
is that's called for
Yeah.
by the statute. We want to ensure that we're in compliance with it. We also have, it'll be part of the budgetary process too, I should say.
Great.
Because it clearly could be extremely resource intensive, depending upon, what the ultimate determination is as to what the statute calls for, and how to go about satisfying it.
And we can talk more about that, but so you're comfortable
Yeah,
committing to coming with something in writing that we can hope to vote
Absolutely.
on?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yep.
And then we'll make sure we get these meetings scheduled. I would also encourage this group to really think about deadlines and milestones along the way so that things don't sit and we really make progress, because there's a lot of work here.
I
Commissioner
just
Carvalho.
think, I haven't seen your proposal,
Yeah.
which is very good, that it's going to be tied to the committees. So that's, and we're doing like, I guess, an upheaval or a restructure, right? It's going to be very much tied to the committees because each committee is going to get a piece of it to look at, right?
Well, the way I wrote the proposal, that's the second step to be decided. The first thing is, we all need to learn whatever we need to know to be able to participate in this. The way I wrote the proposal, it's a staff-led process, and so the first.
I'm saying that second part, and so
The second
that's,
part.
and that we're redoing, so it'll be a little trickier.
Right, and I think in light of our realities, it might be good for you all to propose that. So what should that second step look like, and how, and what's the process for going forward?
Sure.
And-
Yeah, I didn't want to presume to,
Right,
it's
it
the
doesn't
chair's
have to
power
be
to form
committee
committees, so I didn't want to
Right.
presume, but I'm certainly
you
happy
make
making a
recommendations,
proposal on that. I
obviously,
think we
right.
can.
Commissioner Whittingham.
Yeah, we're speaking broadly, but I think that there's a lot of substantial things that were proposed. And so I don't know, Commissioner Ayers, if you want to talk more about that, or if what staff has an issue with, we can raise it, because it just seemed like we were doing this since July, and we have some time constraint, or we're looking at, and we're speaking so broadly with things in a vacuum. I'm not quite sure, because I thought originally, when you had shared it, that the executive director may have commented and thought it was okay. Then I shared my comments, and I had those comments incorporated. He made some changes. Now there are others, but what it is, and now that we have formulated, one of the big things that we asked for is to perhaps separate the review of the opinions versus the regulation, which I think is very important, but there could be other suggestions. One of the things that I was taking on was to really inform myself by reading those opinions, the 300 plus, I haven't finished, but reading them so that I can know what it is, not to do staff work, but to know what it is. And that's when I came up to say, listen, there are several of these that the statute has changed, the rule has changed, but what it is, because I was hopeful that we could perhaps, at least as the opinions are concerned, get to a certain place by December. And my review of a number of them so far suggests, could be wrong, but suggests that it may be doable. Because, I'm reading them and I'm seeing it, and they're set out in a certain way. I download them, read the set, read the other, right? So what is it that we are most concerned about, and how do we get going? Because I believe that's what Commissioner Ayers was hoping for. I can't speak for her, when she said, let's put this on the agenda today so we can get moving what Chair Davey, you've been saying you want us to do.
Right, and I think the way to get moving, since this is a very staff-heavy project, to understand what staff's either objections are or suggestions and modifications to Commissioner Ayers' proposal. But I don't think we should do that in the context of this meeting. I think it should be done offline, and then you come back and report how we're going to move forward, or what progress was made with staff on understanding what this procedure is going to be.
Yeah, I'll just say, I appreciate Commissioner Whittingham's comments, because everything she said about my view was right. I thought we had, Sandy and I had talked a couple of times about the proposal. I thought we had we were on the same page about it. It sounds like there's more to talk about, which I wasn't aware of until last night.
Until I told you.
So, yeah,
Right.
so I am hoping that this doesn't significantly delay the process, because I think,
Sure.
this is one of the major responsibilities the new commission got handed by our statute, and I want to move it through as efficiently as we can.
Agreed. And that's why I think it's really crucial that we get this meeting and that we are real clear about what the timeline is.
So you're suggesting that before we meet, maybe we should, because we have that comprehensive review that you guys did already, that breaks it down. You're suggesting the first step should be going through and seeing.
Meeting I think I can.
Yeah.
So Commissioner Whittingham suggested, and I completely agree, that the advisory opinions are not what, the action plan that I'm writing,
Right,
we don't need to go through all that with the
Right.
advisory opinions.
So those things that aren't still in effect, like I know that the lobbying changed a lot, and so a lot of the opinions might be outdated or superseded by, of course, superseded by session. So I, like maybe getting a review of that in advance of our next meeting, of what issues are still pertinent and what aren't, in terms of that breakdown that we receive.
That is in the breakdown. There's an Excel spreadsheet, unless you guys want something additional.
Do I have an Excel spreadsheet, or I have a little list of the opinions
I can
from?
resolve it. It says which ones are superseded or codified.
Okay.
The
Okay.
regulations, for the most part, back in 2019, we went through all the advisory opinions, and also all the comments and questions we've been getting over the years to try to provide guidance and clarity in the regulations. So we did all that, and a lot of, so 943, the lobbying regulations, for the most part, rule, right? So in fact, it says if anything is inconsistent, the regulations rule. So there are only a couple opinions that really were not, and issues that really were not addressed by the regulation. And then, so most of them, she has in her chart very specifically which
Are no longer, so we're not looking at those opinions and those opinions.
Yep, and
Okay,
I
so
have
I'm
which ones
picturing
are
the
still
one sheet, and maybe just not picturing the one
she
you're
even
talking
cited,
about.
like, 943.2A, this, it
Oh, okay.
addresses
I'm sorry
this,
if I
that
missed
kind of
that.
thing.
Okay.
So I can give it to you.
Okay, great.
I can give it to you again.
Okay, so we have that, so
Yeah,
I guess, so
yeah.
that's, I thought that was what you were.
No, that wasn't, that's a
Okay, so-
part of it.
We shouldn't be having any of this
But,
discussion
they're all on our
at this meeting.
website,
It's
like
ridiculous.
all the old superseded opinions that
And they're
I
all
felt like
searchable.
we can
Oh,
probably,
so
I don't know
should
if we should
we-
take some of them down, but we have all of those, that's no longer good law.
Is there
So
something that
to me,
doesn't
the-
say it when you
ladies-
pop it up?
We should.
I'm sorry.
And gentlemen and
Okay.
commissioners, we should do this in committee,
Okay.
and maybe not sort of consume the time of the full commission. Agreed? Okay.
Okay.
All righty, so let's go back to the code of conduct. And are you going to lead that discussion?
Yes, I'd be happy to. All right, so this is under tab
F.
F in the book.
Yeah.
Staff circulated a red line. We were asked,
Is this going to be long agenda, right? This is long. Could we have lunch?
I hope not.
So we're going to,
Page 31 of
yeah,
the,
so Commissioner Edwards is asking if we should break for lunch. One of the, I think we're meeting with staff, right, for lunch?
Correct.
At what time? Was
1
that
o'clock.
scheduled?
1 o'clock.
So we're scheduled to meet with staff at 1 for lunch. So why don't we keep going until then? Okay. All right.
At the last commission meeting, there were many provisions upon which agreement was reached. There were some instances in which staff was asked to fill in certain items, and the red line that we've circulated reflects our additions to that. There are still some open items.
And I'm sorry, who's revisions?
These are staff's revisions based upon the requests that were made, the comments that were made at the July meeting when this was last addressed. And we've essentially, I think in the introduction, we've proposed implementing the recommendations that we had in the avoiding conflicts of interest section. We've done the same thing with respect to prohibited conduct. I believe the only open item left on that section is paragraph 6. And there's been some discussion. Is there another?
Well, there's an addition on page 1 in the introduction.
Yeah, and that was language that was adopted by resolution, the insertion.
What? No. This one, the business?
Yeah, business, yes.
Yeah, I don't recall adopting that as part of our last meeting. I was going to ask where that came from because I did not recognize that at all. So I don't recall.
I was going to suggest a language change.
Say it again.
I was going to suggest a language change, but
Yeah, I don't.
Why don't we go through this section by section? So let's focus on the introduction. Comments on the introduction, and then maybe you can comment more on your sense that it has already been adopted by resolution. So,
Okay.
Vice Chair Ayers and then Commissioner Carvalho. Vice Chair Austin and Commissioner Carvalho. It's been a very long morning.
all right, I would say rather than by undertaking to accept, I would just say by accepting. I think that's clearer.
Can you? I'm sorry. Where are you?
In the red line, last bullet point.
Oh, the red line. Okay.
That's just the language concept, and I'll speak to the thing itself.
And just before you get there, what's this comment above that? Did we review that, or is there something?
No, the first. This is the first.
There's a light green one that's there.
Yeah, that's you said. The commissioners asked that the statute be cited. The relevant statutory provision or the reference statutory provision. And the question, my perspective, was whether that was to be inserted provision by provision or as a general sort of insertion at the end of the document to show the sources in the public officers law of the various items.
So
but here we've inserted them here.
I think using the language by undertaking to accept is kind of fudge language, and I would just say by accepting limitations. The reason why I think it's important, and I've had this conversation with some of my colleagues as to why we would do that, is that we have focused a great deal on transparency, on being really, for want of a better phrase, Caesar's wife. And that is something that's important, I think, for the public to understand and see.
Sorry, I don't know what Caesar's wife means.
It's an old expression, purer than Caesar's wife. You never heard the expression?
Oh, no, it was...
Well, then never mind.
It's from the Odyssey.
Pure or not pure? I don't know.
It's Homer. She fends off the suitors.
Oh, okay.
Pending Ulysses' return.
Okay.
I'm not that old, but it's an old phrase. All right, in any event, to stand even higher than we need to in order to project a standard for the public that is, I don't think, difficult. I don't think very, very far beyond that which we've agreed to do anyway. I don't think any of us really have an intention of doing business with regard to companies or individuals that have business before this commission. If we were in a judicial...
broad. I think that's very broad. But
well,
go ahead. Listen, I just... first of all, I don't think that's what 773-4A says. And I don't, we're agreeing to be bound by something that doesn't really, to me, reflect the language of that particular statute. or provision of the statute. I think that's a little broad. I think those of us who are out in the working world on a day-to-day basis and team up with different firms and do different types of litigation would be really hard pressed to take this on. I'm not looking to work. I don't know what what the people I'm working with are doing, or if I want to join a different firm, what they're doing, or if I want to go into another area of business. I think this is just really overly broad. I think the things we have agreed to take on from the public officers law are stated in the introduction. And I don't agree with this provision. I think the other things that we agreed to under the Code of Conduct incorporate this in some way or the other with respect to, like, if we find out there's a contract, like those kind of things. But I as a person in the workforce right now, actively in the workforce, that is a provision I'm not inclined to agree with, and I think it limits us, and it limits people who want to come into the commission later on. We're still not a full commission. I think people who are looking to come in being restricted this way is off-putting. And I just think it's overly broad and not necessary for us to adopt when we are adopting the rest of this code of conduct.
And is that specific to this last red line?
That's right, because the rest of the stuff, I think we put it together, all of us. So that's right, with respect to that red line. It wasn't anything we discussed when we discussed the code of conduct. I don't really know where it came from, and
I believe it came from Commissioner Grunwagen's suggestion that we take some conflict of interest language that's already on our website and place it as that last bullet.
All right. I don't agree
That's
with
the
that
genesis of that.
I think that's overly broad, and I think
Commissioner,
it limits future commissioners coming in.
Commissioner Cardozo.
First of all, I suggest that in order to get this done, that we formally start moving on things. And so I strongly disagree with Commissioner Carbello. And we want to be, someone said, purer than Caesar's wife.
I think we should maybe use another expression.
Turn the square corner.
But I don't think we need to go on and on and on about this. We want to not have anybody able to question us, and so I strongly disagree. And I suggest to you that I move that we adopt this particular item, unless you want to do it some other way. But otherwise, we're going to be here for 4 hours on the rest of this.
So there's a motion on the floor and seconded and we'll discuss it, to adopt this particular
The introduction.
The introduction language as it is here with the slight grammatical amendment by Vice Chair Austin. So now so it was the motion was made by Commissioner Carballo, second by Commissioner Cardozo.
Cardozo Austin.
I get my C's and my A's mixed up, and seconded by Vice Chair Austin. So let's have a discussion about it. And Commissioner Whittingham first.
Thank you. You're cute. I really don't see why, I'm going to give you an example of today, and I must use examples personal because I'm in the workforce like Commissioner Caraballo, and
this is the draft.
There is a program with the city, that's fine, it's recorded so I can listen another time. There is a program with the city that I'm practically volunteering. I got $1,000 to help this whole fellowship thing. It's not a lot of money, so I'm not doing it for the money. They sent me the contract a couple of times. When I read it initially, I realized CF CUNY may get funding from the state. So now I have a problem. Can I take that on? Right? It's business with the state. I've read opinions where, CUNY or SUNY might subject it to us, our oversight, right? Now, it is not necessary, and I don't think we need to be holier than thou. I will never want to be on a pedestal, and I hope we're not trying to put ourselves on a pedestal, because, I stated this before in a meeting, that we're all human, and we all make mistakes, and things happen. And I lived to see, in a few short weeks, that commissioners who appeared or suggested or gave the appearance of suggesting, if there's such thing, that we might be held to such a high standard that appears to be holier than thou, violated, perhaps inadvertently, but violated the same standard that they were saying that we should be held to. We should, and I believe every commissioner here holds themselves to a high standard. But I don't believe that we need to have certain restraint that is so tight. It's almost as if we can't move, we're in a stiff jacket, right? It doesn't affect everyone equally. And it will not affect everyone equally. But we should consider some of the other commissioners here and individuals to come. The law makes it that it doesn't apply to us. Now we're saying, no, let's go above. Right. I can't cite the opinion right now, but I read a couple of our predecessors. They may have done some things wrong. I'm sure they didn't do everything wrong. Like, collectively, a lot of people have better minds than mine. And they spoke about really discouraging individuals from the private sector from being on boards and commission if they are restricted and bound by certain provisions. And I believe that was probably one of the reasons why we are not bounded by POL 73. And I'm just suggesting that we take that into consideration when we make this. Again, I have an example today, and I'm practically volunteering, and I can't sign that contract. It's $1,000. It's very restrictive.
Commissioner Ayers?
I just wanted to, this is really a question, but the provision as it's drafted says we would accept limitations on working for or providing goods and services to entities subject to the Commission's jurisdiction, and then it cites POL 73. So I just wanted to make sure I understand. POL 73 deals with contracting with state agencies broadly. Is the idea behind this provision that we would sort of, are those two things coextensive?
Well, I think this is to make this code of conduct, and I'll let others speak to it, reflect what's in POL.
Yeah, the idea is we would just be bound by, we would accept being bound by 73, even though the statute itself doesn't apply to us.
Correct.
So then my question is, I'm just trying to focus on what there's disagreement about here. In other words, because forgive me, but I hadn't thought a lot about, I'm an academic, I don't have a lot of occasion to run into POL 73, and
that's my point too. I don't, I mean, so intimately to make myself, to have us all be bound by something we don't know as intimately as, let's say, the staff does, and the chair. I mean, I read it, I know it. It's not like the CPLR for me. It is. I'm getting to that kind of familiarity with it, but I'm not there. So I don't. 73. If you look at it, how many pages it is. I think what we did here, was pull out the provisions that, as part of this introduction, that we would and could all agree to be bound by, and like I said, so 74, 3, oh, there's different ones. 73, 4A, what? 7. Go ahead.
I was just going to say
A4.
No, so looking at A4, what it says is you can't sell goods or services worth more than $25 to any state agency, And you can't contract to provide to private entities where, if I understand this right, where the state agency exercises control over those contracts. So we can sign contracts when it's with a state-funded entity, as long as the funding doesn't include the state controlling that contract. Stop me if I'm wrong, but that's
Yeah,
what I'm
no,
trying to
right.
get clear on.
So
I can get paid by anybody who gets federal state funding, as long as the state isn't the one deciding whether I get that contract or not. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. So it sounds like to me, and, yeah.
I think in reality, that's a little different.
I just wanted to clarify
than, you know, on paper.
what the prohibition is.
There's also an exception where there's competitive bidding built into it, which is a major, from a perspective of administration of that with respect to those who are subject to that stricture, it is an exception that applies.
So let me be clear, if you will, about who or what agencies we would be prohibited from engaging on a contractual basis. So all state agencies. Correct. State legislators for state business. But state legislators for non-state business.
Well, let me ask, if I may, just to
No, but answer, somebody, I just want to hear somebody answer the
You mean
question
if, for example,
before we ask another.
a state
Okay,
legislator,
all right.
who.
Who's getting a divorce, for
Right,
example?
thank you.
That
Yeah.
was what-
Okay, thanks.
And, I also want to say I did
But
not.
wait, let's not go down another track here. So who are we? So state legislators for state business, other, statewide elected officials, such as the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, state controller. I mean, and if we can't answer these questions in fairness to everybody, how do we make a decision?
That's right.
And I think that is fair.
That's right.
Raise your hands.
So New York is trying to weigh in here. Go ahead.
I mean, I think that, I think Professor Ayers summarized the statute pretty well. It covers state agencies, and it covers private entities where the transaction is being controlled by a state agency. The key phrase is state agency.
Got it.
Like
Okay.
yours might fall in there, right?
The Commission on
'Cause it's,
Judicial Conduct falls under that, so I can't take pay as a referee if I get appointed.
But even the one you're talking about.
But you don't have
judicial.
jurisdiction
That's-
over it.
that's-
So I
That's
guess.
nothing to do with the state agency. That's covered by this.
Right, so who would adjudicate these disputes? Let's say it is state agencies or a private entity controlled by the state. Let's say, assuming we're off the commission, there's a contract, someone challenges it, where and how would that be adjudicated, just out of curiosity?
This is only on current.
Right.
So it's only for current, it's not lifetime.
That's correct.
It's during your time as a
Does that-
commissioner.
Okay. Does that make a difference here for commissioners?
Yes, it makes, I still don't, I think it's overly broad. And the other thing, I just want to say.
Even
I'll
though
finish
it's
that.
only state state agencies?
Also, listen to Commissioner Whittingham's issues. I mean, when you're in private practice, you're in a different position.
Well, can I actually ask Director Stan to?
Sure, go ahead, Kavita.
The Commission on Judicial Conduct would not count as a state agency under this provision. We don't have jurisdiction over them.
And they're not defined as a state agency because they're not part of a state department.
Will
Correct.
CF CUNY be, I think is CF CUNY or RF CUNY come under our jurisdiction?
Yes.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe I've read opinions.
The research foundation,
Research foundations, no.
Yeah,
CUNY, no?
Research.
that is the one I have a contract with,
See, so it is an issue.
or I haven't signed it.
The Research Foundation is not a state agency.
the research foundation is not a state agency for this purpose.
So we have to go through all
We have
of
to go
this,
through
though.
each
It's
of them
like-
Have to
and all.
go
Yeah,
through.
it is.
Because it's.
Well, yeah, I
agree
so,
with what you're saying, Chair.
so, I'm sorry, Commissioner Carvalho, you either, did you say?
I
you-
thought, no, I thought you were saying that.
I
because
thought
we
it was so,
understand-
I thought it was lifetime, so
Oh.
taking that off the table, it's only while we're commissioners. I think our legal folks in New York City have said that it's only state agencies or entities that are state control,
That's CUNY.
but not the
But not the
research
research
foundation.
But
foundation.
for
And
us,
so
we go through this
so-
every single, I mean, yeah, I,
So, but here's the thing.
Yeah.
And so having said what I said, I do believe that having accepted these positions, we have agreed to a different standard that we may run afoul of. I mean, 4 of us have been accused of something already on our under investigation. So that's just going to happen. But I can support this with the current understanding. I will support it with the current understanding that it's state agencies and that it is entities that are state control, private entities that are state control. That I can support.
I see CUNY here. When we took this position, Chair Davian, when we signed the thing, as it said here, we weren't bound by POL 73. So we didn't have that advance notice of what we are going to be bound by. So why do we do it now? And again, I'm just saying, like, you know, I'm looking right here at the state aid. It does include City University of New York, according to this, that the term, it includes state university, including all their constituents, units, except community college, according to this definition of state agency. So contracting with SUNY is a problem.
Yes.
And stuff, and contracting with SUNY is
Yeah.
a problem.
And I faced that very early in my tenure here, and I ran it up the flagpole with our general counsel and with our executive director, and they said, "Have you lost your mind?" There's some version of that. Why do you think you can do this? And I got it. And so I totally, I mean, I agree with those parameters. I understand them, and I would support it. But at some point, we're gonna have to take a vote. So
yes,
because we
well,
have a motion on the table. Sure.
I just want to say, number one, okay.
Commissioner Carvalho, Commissioner Edwards.
No, I'm done.
Okay, Commissioner Carvalho.
First of all, the inclusion of the POLs, I don't agree with that, because I think those are different than the words we're using here. And if we're going to be bound by the entirety of the provision, you know, that's a different thing. I think the idea of these prohibitions we're giving ourselves, or code of conduct that we're instituting, that's fine, but without the POL. So I don't agree to have the POL provision there, because it doesn't quote it directly, and it's
So you
not the
could
same.
accept the language of state agency.
No, I'm talking about the whole thing, you know, I'm not, I don't agree with that language.
Just remove the
rest bullet
citation
point.
to- remove the
Yes, to remove the
citation.
citation.
To the public officers law.
To the public officers law, yes.
Okay.
Because it's, again, that's not what we're saying. I'm not saying, I mean, that's not what my understanding of what.
And since I was the one that inserted them at the request, that I heard that there be some statutory
Yeah, we discussed
citations.
that, I understand.
Okay.
But now that I look at the statutes and look at it, I see what the difference
All right.
is.
So yeah, the citation there is really only for purposes of offering a reference to where this notion comes from.
So you're saying
So
take
maybe
it
we
out.
want to
The
place
notion
that
of
somewhere.
acknowledging restrictions on your ability to do business with the state comes from 73-4A. That's why it's there.
So we're taking it out.
Yes, I'd like to.
So you're offering an amendment to the motion, to the,
Yes, I'm still amendment to the motion with that, removing the POL.
all right, so why don't we
And the
have that?
second
as a-
thing
Sure.
is to
Well,
remove the
Well,
whole
let's see.
last
Might we
red-
do these
Let's
one
take
at a
them one
time?
at a time, yeah.
Okay.
But, Okay,
So
so
Cardozo
you
has-
you have an amendment to the motion that we remove the references to POL 73.
Right, and I do have an
Hold on.
amendment as far as
Hold on,
red
hold on,
line.
hold on,
pers-
hold on,
Okay.
hold on. Okay, so that's the first motion. Is there a second to that amendment?
Second.
Okay. Is there any more discussion about removing the POL 73 citation? All right, all those in favor of that amendment to this motion to remove that citation, please say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Actually, it was,
Opposed. So we've got three in opposition, and who are in favor? The ayes again, just stay there, 1, 2, so you're supporting the
amendment.
the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, one, removing 73. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so it passes. Okay? So you say, the second part?
And the second amendment is to move that, the last addition in there.
I can't hear you.
Sentence. To remove the last
So
addition, the last.
remove the last bullet in red.
Yeah.
So all those,
No, no, you
is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Whittingham. Discussion. All those in favor of removing the last bullet, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
The amendment doesn't carry.
So the amendment doesn't carry.
It doesn't carry?
No.
Does not.
You need 6 either way, so it stays as
Oh.
is. All right, so now we'll vote on the motion on the floor is to vote to adopt the introduction.
Is it in and out?
It's in,
Is in.
without a statutory citation.
Ava, did you vote?
Yeah.
I did.
She did.
Okay.
All those,
Something's missing.
Seymour.
so again,
Seymour.
those in favor of keeping the final bullet, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed to keeping the final bullet. Seymour, which way did you vote? Keeping or keeping? Okay,
Keep the final bullet.
so that's, okay. So how
Keeping.
many of us are there? There are 8 of us.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Right, okay. All right, so now we're going to vote on the entire introduction. All right? All those in favor of the introduction to the Code of Conduct for members of the commission, please raise your hands. In favor of the intro, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All opposed?
Opposed.
2, it passes.
All right, and I would ask maybe that if we can stay this, the enforcement, like stay the adoption of this for like 60 days.
Well, hold on, let's get through it first.
Okay, all right.
All right, so conflicts of interest, comments on that
Right,
section.
give us to figure out.
We're at what?
So this would take us, conflicts of interest, this would take us through till we get to gifts and special treatment.
We're at
And I want to remind the commissioners that with respect to items 1 through 5, you've already voted on those. So it was just 6 that was tabled from the last meeting
That's the green.
for you to consider revised text.
And that's starting with the green.
Correct.
Okay,
There was the question on 4, whether there was the insertion. It works either way.
any comments on 6 under avoiding conflicts of interest, prohibited
Yeah,
conduct?
let me circulate the language that, for the definition that Commissioner Ayers
Yes,
had proposed. You hand this down?
Is that the definition of matter?
Yes.
It was in the email.
It's in the email.
Right, okay.
That would be placed where?
It would be placed in 6, and it would include a definition
Okay.
for purposes of this subsection or subdivision.
Yeah, I wrote the part that's not in italics a couple months back, and the new site, the new part is the italicized part. That Sandy sent this morning.
Thoughts, commissioners?
When it's convenient for me to be in the queue, yeah, so I have questions about the proposed new language. You know, my basic concern is that this be clear who we're allowed to communicate with without seeking authorization from the full body. My understanding is that in general, paragraph 6 sets up a system where if we want to talk to somebody who counts as a person with direct or interest in a matter, we request that in the same way that staff now requests permission to communicate with an agency as part of an investigation, that would sort of, to the extent that commissioners seek that, it would become part of the meeting. We say, I'd like to speak to so-and-so. And so my question is, who is going to be subject, in terms of making sure we all understand who is going to be subject to this? Honestly, I haven't decided how I want to vote on this yet. So to be as clear as possible, the example that prompted a lot of this is advocacy groups. So as I read this new language, we would have to seek authorization for a communication on any matter with the person who's interested. A matter includes any subject that's related to the administration, interpretation, or enforcement of the laws that we enforce or our proposed jurisdiction. So it sounds to me like if an advocacy group wants to talk to a commissioner about a proposal for legislative or regulatory reform, I guess I'm not 100% sure whether that's a group with a direct interest, but they certainly do have a view on that policy matter. So is it staff's understanding that, yes, we would have to seek permission to communicate with an advocacy group about a proposed reform to New York State ethics laws? He's nodding, so right, okay. And in terms of the other people who might want to talk to us about things, is a registered lobbyist who has an opinion about the way we administer our lobbying filing system, is that a person with a direct interest? And so we would have to, so if a lobbyist says, hey, you know, your filing system is really hard to navigate, we'd have to say, I can't, we'd have to retroactively disclose that comment to the full commission.
Theoretically,
We can
yeah.
respond, but we have to disclose.
So if, oh, you're on the ethics commission, like I have a hard time with your website, we have to come and we have to send an email to the full body saying somebody spoke to me about that. Do we have to disclose the content of that communication, that, you know, so-and-so who's a registered, I mean, I worked with, some of my students are registered lobbyists. I have to say, you know, my student so-and-so complained about our website to me, or do I just have to say they communicated with me about our website?
I will defer to our general counsel and our executive director.
Well, again, the preference is that you not enter into that communication. If you're drawn into it, you know, unwittingly, then that's when you sort of inform your commissioners, your fellow commissioners, you disclose to the commissioners, and if you want to continue that communication with your student with respect to his or her or their lobbying activity, then you get the permission or authorization from the commission to do that.
So it sounds like if it's just a general question, we have to inform the commission. That makes no sense to me.
Or in the alternative, if someone who has an interest in business before this commission wants to speak to you about that, you invite them to speak to the entire commission.
So
But the website is not like that.
But the website would be covered under this, I think, right? So
Why?
if they don't like it, because it's
Yeah,
a subject that's related to the implementation of the laws.
Yeah.
So it's covered by this provision.
What is the purpose of this paragraph.
Perfect.
Wait, can I just finish so it's just so we could get, I just want to make sure I understand the scope of what this would do. What about, I made a little list of things I wanted to make sure I understood. What about taking a CLE on the ethics laws? If it's a state bar CLE and the person who's teaching it is a registered lobbyist, do we have to get permission to attend that CLE?
Oh,
I mean, that's a communication.
This is a one-on-one CLE or a publicly administered CLE?
This doesn't distinguish.
she's a student in a CLE.
Yeah, I'm a student in a CLE. That's a substantive communication between me and the person speaking, right? They're communicating.
About what?
The
About
ethics
business?
laws, the interpretation of the ethics laws. It's a CLE on government ethics.
So this is about private conversations. This is not about a CLE where other members of the public are present. This is not about a commission meeting where other commissioners are present. This is not about meetings where staff is present. And if there's a roundtable discussion with an advocacy group, that would not fall into this category. This is about conversations that to go into to slightly answer hopefully Commissioner Cardozo's question as to what's the purpose of this. The idea generally is to hopefully prevent a situation where commissioners find themselves on lobbying reports or find themselves in a situation where, there's a dispute as to what was said in a meeting. If there are these private communications with interested parties, who has notes of those meetings, who's keeping notes of those meetings. So that's the general idea behind this.
Yeah.
But having said that, Kavita, I do think that there are going to be situations where, and I'm probably going to support this, although I do think it's pretty restrictive. But there are situations where, some of us are going to appear in lobbying reports. First of all, we have no idea how we got there, but we're going to be there. And in other situations, we're going to be at a funeral or a cocktail party or walking down the street or any myriad of things. And I've said this before because most of the folks on this commission lead very active lives, and our lives intersect with people who have over whom we have jurisdiction. We're gonna, including lobbyists and particularly advocates. So we're going to find ourselves in these lobbying reports, perhaps inadvertently. Anyway, that should not be in and of itself seen as somehow an automatic violation, because we don't know what the lobbyists, for example, or the advocates, thought they were doing in those conversations. So those things are just going to happen. This seems like really restrictive to me. And the fact that Commissioner Ayers has, a whole list of questions that are ambiguous, but I would agree again that we've agreed to step into this and to sort of hold ourselves at a different.
Can I just say one thing? I learned very early on as a young lawyer that there's an advantage in having, they have to be understandable, but in having bright black letter rules that you observe, because anytime you're questioned on whether X, Y, or Z happened, or you said such and such, you may or may not remember it. You may or may not have a way to prove what you did or didn't say, but you can say, I have a rule and I always observe it. That's always my practice. The other advantage of having a black letter rule, and it has to be intelligible, so we have to gain clarity in it, admittedly, is that it gives you the ability when somebody tries to buttonhole you to say, that's terrific, but I'm prohibited, unfortunately, from engaging in the subject, discussion with you on that subject matter. But if it's really important to you or you think you have something to contribute, why don't you just, send an email to me and the rest of the commission, or we can invite you to our next roundtable, something like that. It's a tremendously useful tool if you can say, I'm sorry, I just can't talk about it. It'll save you from so many of those, potentially problematic situations. If it's soft and fuzzy, maybe I can do it, maybe I can't. You don't have the ability. Now you're forced to exercise a judgment each time somebody's trying to draw you into something, whether it's innocent or not. And certainly if somebody's trying to lobby you, it's terrific to be able to say, I can't do it. You can even say, I wish I could, but the resolution passed 6-2.
So let's
and
see
I-
if
and I
Commissioner
can't.
Ayers is done, then we're going to go to
Oh,
Commissioner
Commissioner Cardozo.
Cardozo.
I cut off.
Just really briefly on Kavita's point, thank you for the answer. I thought there was at some point language about an open meeting in this provision, but I don't see it there anymore.
It's in number
I'm
one.
wondering if that,
But not in this,
It's in
this
the-
one. Maybe we should add this.
yeah, I was just wondering if that was, because I mean, I'm not sure a COE counts as an open meeting. If you have to pay to attend, I don't think that's open, but I agree that what Kavita's saying would be a better version of the rule. I think we'd have to add something to make that, I think, public meeting maybe, but open meeting refers to open under the open meetings law, I would think, and that's not. So anyway, I would suggest if we go forward with this, I would support adding a clarification along the lines of what Kavita said, and now I'm done, thank you.
Commissioner Cardozo.
I just think this is overbroad because, if you're at a bar association meeting and someone comes up to you who you've known for most of your career and he says, boy, I see you guys are looking at X, Y, and Z. What, just to say, can't talk to you about it. I just don't think that's practical, and not sure what purpose it is serving to have that kind of prohibition. I just think the whole thing this paragraph should be eliminated.
Meaning number 6. So
Number
there's a
6,
motion
yes.
to eliminate paragraph 6. It's been seconded by Commissioner Carballo. Question from the Vice Chair.
In 1 through 5, are we satisfied that having quote-unquote ex parte communications with people who come before us on substantive issues is sufficiently covered if we take 6 out?
Yes, I think it is.
If the answer is yes, I'm fine with it.
Well, can I respond to that?
Please.
That's partly why I suggested adding a definition of matter that's restricted to matters that are either adjudicative in nature, meaning the stuff we talk about in executive session, or confidential by law, because I think, obviously, we're not allowed to talk about things that are confidential by law. We don't need to add anything in, because that's an existing restriction that we don't have power over. But I think that the category of things we shouldn't be talking about, to me, includes more than just things that are confidential. It's anything where we're acting as judges rather than as policymakers. And my instinct, as I've said to multiple people, is I think part of the job of a commissioner is to speak to stakeholders about policy issues that we have power over. I think that's appropriate. I tried to look at what other ethics boards do. I could only find one, California. Their commissioners on their ethics board are free to speak about policy matters. It's adjudicative matters that they're restricted to, which seems to me a normal sort of agency process, that an agency commission, the State Board of Regents or any other board, if you want to talk about general policy, that's fine. I mean, in fact, it's what ensures that your views are not sort of encapsulated by what you understand from the staff. In other words, part of our role is to be independent of each other, of our appointing authorities, and of staff to bring those viewpoints in. And to me, part of being independent is having conversations. That said, I'm very sympathetic to Sandy's view that my life is a lot easier if I can just say, I'm sorry, I can't talk about that to everybody. I love not talking about stuff to people. So I really do see the appeal there. It simplifies things, and what Sandy said, I think, is extremely important, that you're going to end up with disputes that somebody said, Commissioner Ayers told me such and such in a conversation, and then there's a dispute that you could have avoided if you just stayed out of the conversation. So, I mean, to me, prudence counsels avoiding those conversations. I think where I'm leaning is towards a code of conduct provision that ends up with a definition of matter, keeping paragraph 6, defining matter in the way that I suggested, which is adjudicative matters, not policy matters. So we can't talk about the specific things we're going to vote on with anybody, but we can talk about whether you think the ethics laws are good. Right. I can talk to I can teach government ethics without seeking prior approval.
We already are bound by that.
So we have a motion on the floor to remove 6. So let's speak to that. Anybody who wants to speak against moving it?
I would suggest, though, if we adopt the definition of matter, that will clarify what 6 is. So I think we should first deal with adding 6 before we decide whether to eliminate 6 in its entirety.
You mean adding matter?
Right, yes.
Oh, you're right. So,
but the motion, so we can amend the motion.
I move to amend by, so that the new motion is to make 6 part of it, adding my definition of matter and not the italicized additions.
I'm gonna rule that out of order because I don't think it supersedes this if you're just gonna amend the motion, but what you're doing is you're introducing a new motion to keep 6 plus add a definition of
I guess
matter.
that's true, but I don't know how I'm voting on this motion.
Who made the motion to?
Yeah.
Whittingham.
No,
Okay.
Why don't we
Will
remove
you
the
withdraw the motion for the
moment
moment?
and add,
So we can discuss putting that in and
Accept a
then,
friendly amendment.
Removed.
Okay, you're moving.
Once it removed, so let's take a vote on her motion, all right? All in favor of removing 6, please raise your hand.
Well, we can still.
1,
Then we can
2,
still add in what I'm saying.
3,
So yes.
4,
Sure.
5,
And when we can entertain this?
and
Then I'm going to move to add. it
then
back
she's
in
gonna move
with my
6,
change.
7, okay, it
Okay.
passes
and
6.
if I may
6
just,
is-
Mr. Friendly,
Wait,
remove
wait,
it as
wait,
presently.
wait, wait.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the procedure that we're adopting. now.
So we have just voted to remove 6 as it is listed in the book at the
and now
moment.
you
Okay.
make your motion.
Now, we're going to open it up for a new motion. Commissioner Ayers.
Okay, so I move to add a version of 6 back in that has all the text that's in front of us, plus my definition of matter as circulated by email,
So-
not including the italicized
So
additions that staff.
I'm going to suggest,
So it is that, but
here's
without the
what I would
italicized.
like to suggest, that we break for lunch, since we have the staff waiting upstairs. Someone do some wordsmithing of the new 6 with matters added, and then we circulate it, and we have something before us to vote on immediately after
Well,
lunch.
that's what I did by email last night. I can just resend
this
it, but
it?
yeah, it's that, but without.
Yeah.
Oh,
Is
yeah, there it
that
is.
the entire 6
Yeah.
rewritten?
No, that's the new sentence.
It just
Yeah.
has the.
But
But that's the thing, is, so
I'll send it around if you want, yeah. I can do that on my computer
completely
right now.
rewritten, and you'll send it
The new
around.
6, the whole
Okay,
thing.
the
I got
new
it.
6, perfect. All right, so
I was
let's,
doing that while we talked.
there are no objections, we'll break for lunch now, and then we'll come back at 2, right at 2, and the first thing we'll deal with is this item 6 in the code of conduct. Agreed? No objection?
I have to leave before 2,
Well, what time do you need to leave?
1:45.
We'll convene at 1:40. On the
Okay,
dot.
thanks.
Okay, and we'll deal with this first thing, but we'll convene on the dot, all right? So you want to ask?
Yep, so Jean, we are ready to break until 1:40
Do we have
and
to go
go
someplace?
Upstairs.
All right, wait for the count.
And now we're meeting staff. New.
Because
All right, welcome back to the public session of our September 27 meeting of the New York State Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government. So now let's return to our code of conduct and item number 6 under the section of avoiding conflicts of interest prohibited conduct. And I'm going to turn to Commissioner Ayers, who has a motion to make.
Right, so my motion is to, since we previously deleted the existing text of section 6, to replace that empty space
Yes.
with what I emailed to you all, which is the same thing that, just a few minutes ago, which is the same thing that I sent before, that is the previous text plus the definition of matter that limits matter to essentially adjudicative type proceedings rather than policy type issues.
So it's a motion that we adopt this.
That be adopted and become the new section 6.
Is there a second to that? All right, thank you, Commissioner Edwards.
Oh,
You
I
second
withdraw
it.
that.
You don't want to second it. All right, Commissioner Cardozo. All right. So discussion.
So,
Well, I just think this is a very appropriate way. It appropriately limits the limitation by dealing with, in effect, quasi-litigated matters and avoids the problem of prohibiting communication with an advocate or something like that. So I think it's a very good solution, and I urge its adoption.
Great. Commissioner James.
Yeah, I support it as well. I was thinking that we might want to add, after the first phrase, except at a public meeting, but looking at what the matter involves, I don't think we need to do that anymore, because the matter is so limited.
Great.
Right, I think that's right. Thank you.
All right, other comments?
It is this, pretty
Not
much.
with the italics.
Just end there. Just end there.
Other comments? Questions? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor of this section 6 as distributed by Commissioner Ayers, please raise your hands. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3. It fails.
Okay.
All right. Because we need 6 to pass it.
You need 2/3 to pass it?
We need 6.
A
The
majority
of the
11
commissioners. Right. All right.
And I apologize for having to leave.
No, understood.
I mean, I wouldn't apologize anyway, but I.
Understood. All right. So let's look at the section then. So are we ready to vote on this section without the subsection 6? Motion.
You've already voted on every other provision.
Did we? Okay. All right. So what about the preventing conflicts of interest recusals? Anything there we need to vote on?
Well, before Commissioner Ayers leaves, I
Yes.
just wanted to, because I know you had an opinion on it as well, about if, once we adopt this thing, it's
Operative.
yeah, up till, for 90 days.
So you want to vote to,
I want to vote, whatever we adopt, I want it to be effective in 90 days.
so is that a motion?
That's my motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion that whatever the final product is, it'll go into effect 90 days from today?
Yes.
All those in favor of that motion? 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. So that motion fails.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Yeah, yeah. It is a code of conduct that affects us each personally and professionally in different ways. And we did not agree to be, we're specifically excluded from public officers law. And so I think that to the extent that it affects us all personally, I think we should have an opportunity to decide whether or not we want to
Continue under it, sure.
with the code of conduct that.
And just remember, the public officers law reference was removed.
What?
The public officers law reference was removed.
Right, but I'm just talking about the whole code. Like, I think we should have an opportunity to decide if we want to have to, if we agree to be bound by this code of conduct, we may not.
Right.
And I don't think it should be that we have today, and so now we're bound by this code of conduct, whether or not 3 months from now we're here. And so
But that's where we are.
Huh?
I mean, but that's where we are. Right.
I think that's problematic.
Okay.
Yeah, you're saying it's taking effect today.
Well, let's finish it.
Yeah, let's finish it, right.
And then renew.
So anything in
Paragraph F.
F that we need, okay, so under paragraph F on page 3, in the issue, if any member has any questions, concerns, or doubts regarding the need for recusal, they're expected to contact the executive director or the general counsel for guidance and advice. The request for guidance and advice shall be treated as confidential and advisory only. However, if the member is advised that recusal is warranted and the member does not agree, the member will be deemed to be recused until the commission has an opportunity to vote on whether recusal is warranted. Any required commission vote shall be taken in executive session at the next scheduled meeting following the member's receipt of the rejected advice.
And those last 2 sentences are the new text that you did not have before you last meeting.
But did we not have the member will be deemed to be recused until, because I believe I raised a concern about that. That means if it's advisory only, it's not quite, if you're going to be deemed recused, that means it takes effect before the commission, the full commission has the opportunity to vote, based on that language.
What happens if the member,
Well, sure.
what happens if the commissioner then participates in a vote before there's an opportunity to do anything else? I mean,
How would that happen? How would the commissioner participate in a vote before anything else can happen? I think it's at the next meeting, the very next meeting, because if the commissioner is going to participate in a vote, the first vote should be the full commissioners deciding if this commissioner should be recused. That should be the very first vote, whenever there's.
And then a vote on the activity.
And then vote on the activity.
That makes sense. So we just may not need that sentence.
The only issue is if in fact the person may be recused, normally we would not provide them with the information about the matter.
Right.
That's true.
So I guess we'll just have to vote sooner rather than later. Is that a, well, I guess.
Yeah, no, that is true. And so we will be considered recused in terms of information sharing until the commissioners had a chance to vote. I don't think we have any choice but to do that.
And it's only on that singular issue.
And it's only on that singular issue. Is there a motion on section F?
I move to adopt it.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of adopting, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed? All right, so the motion fails. So I have a feeling that we're not going to end up adopting this code of conduct at the end of the day. But we can continue to go through it and see where we are.
But I guess it would be helpful if that's indeed the case.
We can revisit it when we have a
Either
full
revisit or
complement.
talk through why, what the opposition is, that we can work that out.
Let's wait till we have a full
No,
complement of
With
members.
members here.
no.
I see.
Why don't we just table it?
The motion to table, second. Any discussion? No discussion to table. All those in favor of tabling? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's all of us. All right, so we're table it. We have a full complement of commissioners.
May I suggest, though, that we get a new, ask Keith to put together,
Yes,
you know,
with the things that we've
with a
approved.
highlighted of what we still, in effect,
Right.
need.
Need to consider.
Now,
Right.
this,
Well,
this,
I don't know if we want to wait until we have a full complement, because I don't know when we'll have
Right.
11, but certainly.
Right.
Right, no, not a full
Larger
complement, but right, of the commissioners who are active,
Right.
when we have all
9
of
members.
the 9 members here who are
Right,
active.
we'll prepare a version for the next meeting reflecting the prior votes, the votes
Right.
at this meeting, and just those provisions that
would it make,
remain open.
would it make sense for the, what do you call it, the working group that's working on this, reach out to those who are concerned and come to some consensus on what they could accept? So
Sure,
we don't have to battle it out in.
sure. Yeah, yeah,
I am concerned how it affects people's livelihood.
of course,
I am
right,
concerned
of
about
course.
that.
Yeah,
I don't have any livelihoods, but I appreciate that.
all right, so hopefully we'll have the 9 commissioners in place for the October meeting, and we can finalize it
Go
then.
forward, really.
If I may, I had requested that staff draft a provision with regard to incoming commissioners providing a recusal list. And I thought we agreed that that would be added in.
We'll add it to, we'll have a proposal in the next draft.
We are now at the roundtable, I believe?
Yes.
Planning? Okay.
Yes, we talked a little bit about it, but Emily has, do you have slides?
Well, I was just going to speak to them.
Okay.
So this goes kind of hand in hand with developing our legislative agenda, so I'm going to kind of take us through where we've been, where we are, and kind of where we're going, just so everyone kind of knows the numbers, the kind of iteration. So we started back in March with a public hearing where we received all the comments from the various people, and personally, that's the individuals. Then in April, we had a special meeting of the commission to review all of those comments, and the comments were parsed up to the various committees, and the committees met and reviewed each recommendation and said, oh, we've got staff's interpretation or staff's feedback on them. And we have gotten updates on which ones we're moving forward with, where we're going with those, and which ones we're going to be part of the working group for the legislative agenda, working group to consider. So that was through May through September. We did that committee work. So now here we are in September to October. The special working group will develop a draft of the commission's legislative agenda based on the committee's work that we have to date, and I'm compiling a list of everything that said, okay, this needs to go to the legislative agenda. So we're working on compiling that list now. So when that first meeting of the working group meets, we'll have the list of everything the committee said this needs to go to the legislative agenda working group. And to meet our timelines, to have this done by the end of the year, that working group would need to share the draft legislative agenda with the whole commission by the end of October, right? So hopefully in advance of the October meeting, so staff could then talk about it, commissioners could talk about it, what's on the proposed legislative agenda, because we're on a tight time frame. So there's 3 weeks that I see that we could hold this roundtable, and it's between October 30th and November 17th. Given the holidays, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just that I'm out of commission, but you should go ahead and do it if it falls within this time from the 2nd to the 17th.
I was going to email all the commissioners and say, which days are you not available during this time? And we wouldn't want to hold it on election day, right? So I'll say, these days are not, here's all the days, let us know which days you would be available for a public meeting, or excuse me, the roundtable. So that we can hopefully find a consensus a date where everyone can meet. And the purpose of the roundtable is, there's kind of threefold, right? One is to provide feedback on the actions the commission has already taken that did not require legislative action. So kind of like what Carol did today, we could have a couple of slides where staff says, this is what we've done to implement recommendations already, and we're providing that information to the folks at the roundtable. We would share the commission's draft legislative agenda, kind of walk them through that. And then we would get feedback from the roundtable participants on our draft legislative agenda. Commissioners could ask them questions. They could give us ideas about maybe you want to consider this, not that, or ask questions like, why isn't this on for this year? Things like that. And then if commission members feel like there's anything else that they wanted to put on the agenda in addition for the roundtable, we could do that as well. I was hoping that the legislative agenda work group would kind of be the sounding board for, okay, but this is where we're going to hold this is how long, here's a draft agenda that we want to share with the commission to kind of be, because it kind of goes hand in hand with the legislative agenda, so that as I'm planning it and doing logistics, I have a sounding board before I bring things to the full commission and we move forward. So kind of our next steps to meet this kind of time frame that we're working on would be, so late September, so probably tomorrow, I will email all of you about your availability for when to hold the roundtable. Then in that early to mid-November timeframe, we would hold the roundtable. By the late November meeting, so by the November meeting, we would incorporate the feedback into the draft legislative agenda. We'd have to have another working group meeting saying, okay, what feedback do we want to incorporate, and then share it with the whole commission to see, if they agree. If it's possible, we could vote on the legislative agenda at the November meeting, but if in the discussion, commissioners say, no, I really want this or I want that, then we could table it to the next meeting without, whether that's January or December, without, really messing up our timeline. As long as we get it to the legislature in January, I think we'll be solved. So there's going to be at least 2 shots for the full commission to talk about it and see what's in there, and then we can make revisions as necessary. So that's kind of how I've outlined it. And I'll be looking to the working group to help, let's look at the folks that we want to invite to the roundtable. How many hours is it going to be, locations, that type of thing. Any questions?
Questions, comments?
Yeah.
Commissioner Edwards.
Questions? In regard to the people you're thinking about inviting.
Claudia, I can't hear you.
Is it at least going to be limited to the people who we invited, the people who attended the public hearing, or the people who responded, who had the questions?
Who had comments, right. So definitely be looking after the people who submitted comments and some of those people, but I think there might have been some folks that we knew had been interested but weren't able to attend or submit comments at times, so we might look to add those people as well.
Those who submitted comments?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that should be the case, because otherwise it becomes another public hearing.
Right, exactly. It's going to be invited individuals, yeah.
And then,
Oh, I'm sorry, I was going to ask you something. So we'll be invited only.
Right, it'll be, so I should have probably mentioned this earlier. So it will be, because it's going to be a commission meeting where we're inviting people in, it will be webcast. People can come in and watch, but it's invited speakers who would be at the table that you would be having the dialogue with.
and speakers who made contributions.
Therefore, since it's going to be a meeting, they could physically be present even though they couldn't talk. Right?
Correct, like any commission.
For the
meeting.
public session.
And we'll webcast it.
So they cannot talk? They won't
The
be-
invited people who will be at the round table with you will speak. But let's say somebody just wants to come in and watch it, like anybody that would come to this meeting, they would not have the opportunity at that time to speak. They could always submit comments to us in writing on the draft legislative agenda if they would like to, as they could on anything.
Okay, so the ones that will be at the table with us and allowed to speak are those individuals who have previously submitted comments.
And if there's anybody we've since heard from that we think might have valuable things said. Because I don't know who all of you have heard from, so I don't want to say, yes, it's just those people, but that's the majority.
Yeah, I think
the point I'm getting to is how will we decide outside of that group who we let in to join the table?
I think if you have people you like to speak, you should submit the names to Emily and then let's discuss them.
I was going to work with the working group on I'm not going to just decide. Let's work with the working group on the invite list, keeping in mind numbers, the space, that type of.
My second question was, I guess I'm going to direct it to Commissioner President Davey, Chair Davey, is that why is this not being delegated to the Communications Committee as opposed to your pulling together a working group?
Well, the thing is that we could do that, but we already have this group active around the legislative agenda, and much of what this comes out of that group is comes out of the public hearing, has to do with legislation, and Michael's chairing both. So it's kind of like it's splitting hairs to some degree. But if it's the sense of the body that you want the Communications Committee to handle it, then.
The reason why I say the Communications Committee, it is splitting hairs, is because the public hearing invite and all that was initiated by the Communications Committee. So if this is in response to that, in a sense, then I should think it should come out of the same committee. And even though the Legislative Committee has a greater role, it really is right now it's sort of a subset to this agenda. It's one of the many items.
I'm cool anyway. If nobody, Michael?
Well, I think we should obviously leave it up to the chair, but the legislative committee, there's a lot of legal issues, so we may want to, so the Communications Committee certainly worked on this, but a lot of other people made input into it as a practical matter. So I think getting a cross-section, and we're going to have a huge amount of work to do in the next couple of weeks. That I'll work with Emily on, and I think 3 people is enough to deal
It'd
with.
be
all
more
this.
efficient that
Yes.
way to get it
We
done, given
just
that
have
you're
to-
trying to coordinate schedules, and everybody's got a bunch of work to
Right.
do between now and the end of the year.
And there will be obviously communication with everybody on the commission, and
So what are you
And,
saying? You're saying you want the legislative piece or the communications?
no, I think the legislative committee is the right decision.
How many people
And
on
it's
the
a working
communications committee?
Pardon me?
How many
There's only
people on the
3 of us.
communications committee?
It's
3, I think.
Three,
Claudia Seymour and me.
Oh, it's the same number. Okay.
Yeah.
You're not on the communication?
I am.
And I didn't need to.
I'm not on the legislative one, but yeah. So, yeah, that's, yeah.
I didn't mean to
Okay.
exclude you.
And I wouldn't
Yeah.
suggest, I wasn't suggesting the communications do it in lieu of. I think it should take the lead, but those 2 committees should come together.
Well, but, you know.
But then it becomes 6 people, you're saying, and that's too much.
Exactly, exactly. We've got to
I don't
throughout, become much more efficient and have the ability to move forward, but at the same time, as Fred said, getting the input of everyone else,
So it
which I
can
think the way Emily outlined it
Yeah.
will be fine.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's all I have.
all right, okay. Any other new or other business for the public meeting? All right, a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to Public Officers Law, Section 105, and Executive Law, Section 94, subsection 11, to address matters concerning employment of personnel, pending litigation, and investigative and enforcement matter that is confidential pursuant to Section 94 of the Executive Law. Is there such a motion? Is there a second? Is there a second? A second to the motion to go into executive session? Thank you. Commissioner Edwards. Any objection? Motion passes, and we are in executive session.
All right, James, if you could, cut the line.
Welcome back to the public session of the September 27, 2023 Commission meeting of the New York Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government. And we will have a readout from our discussions in executive session. And I'm going to ask our Executive Director, Sanford Berlin, to do that readout.
Thank you, Chair Davey. The commission discussed matters related to litigation and legal advice. The commission discussed certain guidance matters. The commission discussed a number of investigative matters, and the commission approved an exception to the commission's late fee program for lobbying-related filings while in executive session. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other business to come before this body?
Move to adjourn.
There is a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
How many need an Uber?